So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was a lost sage who walked a third path in the Force Naruto x Bastila Shan, Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. The Echo on the Smuggler's Moon. The rain on Nar Shaddaa was a lie. It was not the life-giving caress of a natural world, but the acidic hiss of industrial runoff and coolant discharge, a perpetual baptism of grime bleeding from the smog-choked sky. It fell on a world that had no ground, only layers. A vertical planet, a stack of sins piled so high they scraped the belly of orbiting starships, each level a different circle of damnation. At the pinnacle, celestial penthouses glittered with stolen suns, their occupants breathing filtered air and drinking cocktails made from the tears of extinct species. At the nadir, in the city where the light was a forgotten myth, things with too many teeth and not enough eyes scuttled through rivers of toxic sludge. And somewhere in the middle, suspended between the profane heavens and the abyssal hells, was a place that should not exist. It was a garden, on the windswept, Duracrete expanse of a forgotten cargo platform jutting out from the monolith of Sector 8J Gamma, life bloomed in defiant splendor. The platform, officially decommissioned 2 centuries ago after a bulk freighter collision sheared off its primary access spire, was an island in the sky, accessible only to those who could fly or those who cared to make a suicidal climb. No one cared. It was a dead space on a world choking on its own populace. Yet here, soil, rich, black, and real, filled 100 waist-high metallic planters salvaged from a derelict transport. In this soil, things grew. Twi'leki sun fruit, their tendrils glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. Alderanian moss that carpeted the space between planters, soft as velvet and shimmering with captured moisture. A single, gnarled sapling from Kashyyyk, its bark already showing the intricate patterns of a Roshar tree, stood as a silent sentinel in the center. The air here did not reek of carbon scoring and stale intoxicants, it smelled of damp earth, of chlorophyll, of blossoming night flowers from some forgotten world whose name was now only data on a holocron. A custom-built atmospheric moisture evaporator, cobbled together from a starship's condenser unit and a droid's logic board, hummed a quiet tune, its collection arrays greedily drinking the chemical rain and rendering it pure. This water trickled through a network of clear pipes, feeding the roots of this impossible sanctuary. At the garden's edge, legs crossed in a posture of serene stillness, sat its architect. Naruto Uzumaki looked like a man who had just rounded his 3rd decade of life. His hair, a shock of defiant gold, was a stark anomaly in the grim monochrome of Nar Shaddaa. It caught the flickering neon glare from a colossal holographic ad across the chasm, a winking green Twi'lek dancing with a bottle of Corellian ale, and seemed to absorb the light, taming it. His eyes were closed, his face angled slightly upwards, letting the foul rain wash over him. The faint whisker-like marks on his cheeks, relics of a life so distant it felt like a dream, were the only truly alien thing about him. He wore simple, practical clothes, dark gray cargo pants tucked into sturdy, worn boots, and a form-fitting, sleeveless black tunic that exposed arms corded with lean, efficient muscle. The Uzumaki swirl, a symbol of a home lost to both time and space, was subtly stitched in red thread over his heart. He was not merely sitting. He was listening. For most beings, Nar Shaddaa was a cacophony, a sensory assault that shredded the nerves. The scream of passing speeders, the thumping bass of cantina music, the layered shouts and murmurs of a billion beings speaking 1,000 languages. The incessant hum of machinery that was the planet's own heartbeat. To the Force-sensitive, it was even worse. A maelstrom of raw, untamed emotion. Greed, lust, fear, despair, fleeting joy, and simmering rage. It was a psychic cesspool that drove most Jedi to meditation chambers and most Sith to glorious indulgence. To Naruto, it was a symphony. His consciousness, a unique fusion of what this galaxy called the Force and what he knew as natural energy, extended beyond his body. It was a sphere of perception that did not seek to block out the noise, but to understand its composition. He could feel the desperate hope of a gambler on a losing streak 3 levels down, the weary love of a mother singing her child to sleep in a cramped hab unit to his left, the call ambition of a corporate agent closing a dirty deal in a spire a kilometer above. He felt the life of the city, the trillions of microbes in its vents, the vermin in its walls, the countless beings living and dying. It was all part of the whole. Passion, serenity, fear, courage, they were not opposites. They were notes in a chord. The dark side and the light side were childish terms for the bass and the treble. True power, true understanding, came from hearing the entire composition at once. He had spent centuries learning this. After the searing, reality-bending agony of his transit from his world to this one, he had found himself adrift, a creature of chakra in a galaxy governed by a different set of rules. He had learned that the energy flowing through him, the gift of the Sage of Six Paths, was not so different from the Force. It was simply a more intimate application. The Force was an ocean, vast and cosmic. Chakra was the art of cupping that water in your hands and shaping it to your will. He had spent his first century in silent meditation on forgotten worlds, integrating the two, letting the ocean flow through the vessel of his own spirit until the distinction ceased to matter. He did not use the Force. He was a part of it, and it was a part of him. A sudden, jarring note of dissonance ripped through the symphony. It was sharp, ugly, and grating. It was the sound of utter despair, of spirits being broken not by circumstance but by calculated cruelty. It was the psychic stench of methodical, industrial-scale suffering, concentrated and foul. It radiated from a warre house complex several hundred meters below his perch, a place he knew was a hub for the exchange, the galaxy's most pragmatic and ruthless criminal syndicate. Naruto's eyes opened. The blue was as clear and deep as a planetary ocean, but held a storm within their depths. He didn't feel anger. Anger was a singular, powerful emotion, but it was blinding. What he felt was a profound sense of wrongness. It was like seeing a painter deliberately slash his own masterpiece, a musician intentionally breaking their instrument. It was an offense against the very nature of existence. He rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion. The rain slicked his bare arms, and he took a deep breath, tasting the chemical tang in the air. The garden, his small pocket of harmony, felt like a condemnation of his inaction. He had created balance here, on this single rooftop, while chaos reigned unchecked below. It was a beautiful hypocrisy. Perhaps it was time to remind the galaxy that balance was not a passive state. It was an active, and sometimes violent, pursuit. He walked to the edge of the platform. The chasm below was a dizzying abyss of flickering lights and cascading traffic. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped off. He didn't plummet. He fell with the controlled grace of a hunting raptor, his body angling to cut through the air. The wind whipped his hair back, a roar in his ears that did not hing to disturb the serene focus in his eyes. He used the Force not to fly, but to subtly alter the air currents around him, guiding his descent. A jutting signpost for Duros Sector Cantina became a springboard. The roof of a passing public transport speeder was a momentary platform. He moved through the vertical city like a ghost, a blur of black and gold against the grim backdrop of corroded metal and weeping stone. His movements were a form of urban taijutsu, each leap and slide a perfect expression of momentum and gravity, harnessed and redirected. He landed as silently as a shadow on a narrow walkway overlooking the source of the disturbance, Warehouse 734. The building was a brutalist cube of stained duracrete, its windows sealed, its single loading bay door shut tight. Armed guards, a mix of hulking Weequay and scaly Trandoshans, patrolled the perimeter, their blaster rifles held with casual readiness. Naruto closed his eyes again, reaching out, not with his sight, but with his senses. The building was a cage of misery. He could feel the dozens of lifeforms inside, their Force signatures dimmed by fear and despair dampening collars. Twi'leks, Togruta, humans, a handful of Zabroks. They were cargo. But there was something else. Two sparks of jagged, angry energy. Dark Jedi, mercenaries, most likely. Their presence explained the sheer potency of the negative aura. They weren't just enabling the suffering. They were feeding on it, their dark power amplifying the despair. And within that sea of hopelessness, he sensed one tiny, flickering ember of defiance. A stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. It was young, terrified, but furiously, incandescently alive. It burned with a desperate will to survive that was a quiet song of its own amidst the cacophony of pain. His path was set. He didn't move towards the main door. He was a shinobi at his core, and the direct path was for fools and armies. He slipped into a recessed alleyway beside the warehouse, a space clogged with discarded droid parts and overflowing refuse containers. The stench was overpowering, but he paid it no mind. He placed a hand on the cold, damp wall of the warehouse. He channeled a minuscule thread of his energy into the wall, not as a destructive pulse, but as a sonar-like vibration. The feedback painted a perfect, three-dimensional map in his mind: the layout of the rooms, the placement of the cages, the patrol routes of the guards, the location of the two dark Jedi who were lazily observing the operation from a raised catwalk. He saw the power conduits, the ventilation shafts, the structural weaknesses. He found a ventilation grate near the roof, just large enough for a man to squeeze through. It was his way in. A silent, force-assisted leap carried him 20 meters up the sheer wall, his fingers and toes finding microscopic holds in the corroded surface. He clung there, a spider in the rain, before pulling himself onto the roof. The grate was held by 4 heavy bolts. A rookie might have used a plasma torch. A Jedi might have used the Force to wrench it open. Naruto simply placed his fingertips on each bolt head and infused them with a precise vibration, hawking them loose from their rusted moorings in seconds. He slipped inside, his descent into the vents as silent as falling dust. The interior of the warehouse was a vision of calculated inhumanity. Dozens of energy cages lined the walls, each filled with sentient beings, their faces etched with the vacant expressions of those who have lost all hope. Exchange foremen with shock prods walked the aisles, their laughter echoing cruelly in the cavernous space. On the catwalk above, 2 figures in dark robes watched with predatory amusement. One was a human male with a scowling face and a red-bladed lightsaber hanging from his belt. The other was a Dathomirian Zabrak, her horns sharp, her skin pale and covered in faint tattoos. Naruto moved through the vent system above them, his presence completely masked, a ghost in the machine. He wasn't just hiding his physical form, he was actively calming the force around him, creating a bubble of neutrality that slipped past the dark Jedi's senses like water through a net. This was a sage's stealth. Not the absence of presence, but a presence so in tune with its surroundings that it became invisible. He positioned himself above the main floor, peering through a grate. He saw the hut, a bloated slug-like creature named Voga, finalizing a transaction on a datapad with the lead foreman. And he saw the source of the defiant spark. In a small, isolated cage near the center of the room, a young Twi'lek girl knelt. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her skin was a vibrant cerulean blue, a stark contrast to the grime on her face and the drab gray of her prisoner's tunic. Her leku, the twin head tails of her species, were twitching with agitation. While the others stared into nothingness, her eyes, a startling shade of violet, darted everywhere, calculating, searching. She was not broken. She was waiting. Her hands, hidden behind her back, were working at the electronic lock on her cuffs. Naruto could feel the faint energy pulses as she tried to short the mechanism. It was her, the Ember. He decided the time for observation was over. The performance was about to begin. He didn't drop down with a dramatic flourish. The first IGN that something was wrong was when the lights in the warehouse flickered, then died, plunging the entire space into absolute darkness, save for the red glow of the cage fields and the emergency lighting on the walls. Confused shouts echoed in the dark. The guards activated the lights on their blasters, sweeping the beams around nervously. Voga the Hutt let out a gurgling cry of alarm. The first guard went down without a sound. His light simply winked out. The second felt a sudden, sharp pressure in the back of his neck and collapsed in a boneless heap. Naruto moved through the darkness like he was born in it, a phantom of pure efficiency. He wasn't using the force in grand, sweeping gestures. He used it for whispers. A nudge to send a guard stumbling into another. A gentle push on a Aster barrel to make it point at the ceiling just as the trigger was pulled. A ripple of confusion sent through the minds of the foremen, making them think the threat was coming from the opposite direction. It was chaos, but it was his chaos. Controlled. Precise. The 2 dark Jedi on the catwalk finally realized this was no power failure. "We have an intruder," the human male roared, igniting his crimson lightsaber. The violent red blade cast long, dancing shadows across the room. The Zabrak female ignited hers a second later, her stance low and predatory. "Show yourself, coward," Naruto obliged. From the deepest shadow in the center of the room, right below the catwalk, a figure seemed to coalesce. It was him, standing calmly, his blue eyes seeming to generate a light of their own in the gloom. "You are making a mess," Naruto said, his voice calm, yet it carried over the panicked shouts with impossible clarity. "And you are disturbing my peace." The human Dark Jedi sneered. "A lone vigilante. You have chosen your final resting place, fool." He leapt from the catwalk, his lightsaber swinging in a vicious arc aimed at Naruto's neck. The attack was fast, powerful, and fueled by rage. It should have cut Naruto in two. It didn't. Naruto didn't even seem to move his feet. He swayed back, the red blade missing his throat by a millimeter, the heat of it kissing his skin. As the blade passed, his right hand shot up. Not open-palmed like a Jedi, but with his fingers curled into a fist. He didn't block the saber itself. He struck the wrist of the man holding it. There was a sickening crunch of bone. The Dark Jedi screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and agony, his lightsaber clattering to the floor. Naruto's strike hadn't just been a physical blow. It had been infused with a pinpoint-accurate burst of force energy, shattering the bone and sending a wave of paralyzing agony up the man's arm. Before the Zabrak on the catwalk could even react, Naruto moved. He scooped up the fallen lightsaber, its red blade humming in his hand. He glanced at it with faint curiosity, as if it were a novel toy. "Unfocused," he murmured, giving it a single, experimental swing. The hum deepened. All passion, no clarity. You pour your anger into the crystal, but you don't listen to what it's telling you. The Zabrak snarled and leapt, her attack more cautious, more skillful. She came at him in a whirlwind of strikes, her blade a red blur. What followed was not a duel. It was a lesson. Naruto met her flurry with the stolen blade, his movements an impossible fusion of grace and unpredictability. He wasn't using any recognizable lightsaber form. It was the way of the maelstrom. He spun and ducked like a leaf in the wind, his body moving in ways that seemed to defy anatomy. He read her powerful chops with the slightest of touches, redirecting her momentum, making her overextend and stumble. He wasn't just defending. He was deconstructing her form, forcing her into a reactive state, breaking her rhythm. While this impossible dance was happening on the floor, something else occurred. From the shadow directly behind the Zabrak's original position on the catwalk, a second Naruto rose up. It wasn't a force projection, a shimmering illusion. It looked solid, real, and was radiating its own potent force signature. A shadow clone. The clone dropped silently to the floor behind the duel. It didn't intervene. It began to walk methodically from cage to cage. At each one, it would place a hand on the control panel. There was a soft sizzle of energy, and the red fields would deactivate, the locks springing open. The prisoners, stunned and terrified, didn't move at first. The clone looked at them, and though its face was identical to the man in the duel, its eyes held a warmth that was both encouraging and commanding. "Go," it said, its voice a perfect echo of the original's. "The way is clear." The duel on the floor ended as abruptly as it began. The Zabrak, frustrated and enraged by her inability to land a single blow, committed to an all-out power strike. Naruto simply sidestepped, letting her momentum carry her past him, and tapped the back of her neck with the pommel of the lightsaber. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The original Naruto stood over his two defeated opponents. He deactivated the lightsaber and tossed it aside, the clatter loud in the now silent warehouse. The prisoners were beginning to flee, a tide of gray uniforms rushing for the loading bay door, which the clone had just opened. Naruto's gaze swept the room and landed on the one cage the clone hadn't opened. The cage holding the Twi'lek girl. He walked towards it, his footsteps measured and calm. She was staring at him, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of terror and absolute awe. She had seen him fight. She had seen the impossible second version of him freeing the others. She was still trying to work the lock on her cuffs, her small hands trembling. He stopped in front of her cage. The red energy field crackled between them. He didn't touch the control panel. He simply raised a hand, palm open towards the cage door. He focused for a barest fraction of a second, feeling the inner workings of the magnetic lock. With a mental nudge, he reversed its polarity. The lock mechanism sparked, smoked, and then popped open with a loud thunk. The energy field vanished. He reached down and gently pushed the door open. "It's all right," he said, his voice soft. "You're safe now." The girl flinched back, pressing herself against the rear of the cage. "Who? What are you?" she stammered, her voice a hoarse whisper. Her basic was laced with the sharp, clipped accent of the outer rim. "My name is Naruto," he replied, squatting down so he was at her eye level, a gesture of non-aggression that seemed to surprise her. "What's yours?" This simple question seemed to disarm her more than anything else he had done. She stared at him, her leku drooping slightly. In her world, names were commodities. Identifiers to be logged and sold. A name was a chain. No one just asked. "Mission," she finally breathed. "Mission Vow. It's good to meet you." "Mission Vow," Naruto said, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips. He noticed her cuffed hands. "Let me help you with those." He reached out slowly. She hesitated, then presented her wrists. The cuffs were standard exchange models. He placed a thumb on the locking mechanism of each one. A small, almost imperceptible pulse of energy flowed from his thumbs, and the cuffs sprang open, clattering to the floor. Mission rubbed her raw wrists, staring at him as if he were a myth made real. You're a Jedi." "No," Naruto said simply, standing up and offering her a hand. "I walk a different path." She stared at his etched hand for a long moment before finally taking it. His grip was warm and strong. He pulled her gently to her feet. At that moment, the shadow clone, its work complete, dissolved into a swirl of harmless, shimmering energy and vanished. Mission let out a small gasp, her eyes going wide. "Criffing hells," she whispered. "Okay. Definitely not a Jedi." A low groan came from the floor. The male Dark Jedi was stirring. Voga the Hutt, seeing his prize prisoners escaping and his enforcers defeated, was furiously hammering at a panic button on his wrist comm. "We should go," Naruto said, his tone unhurried. He started walking towards the now open loading bay, his hand still loosely holding Mission's, as if to reassure her this was real. "It will get very loud here, very soon." As they stepped out of the warehouse and into the perpetual, drizzling twilight of Nar Shaddaa, the first sirens began to wail in the distance. Mission looked back at the chaos, then up at the strange, golden-haired man who had single-handedly dismantled a slaver operation like it was a mild inconvenience. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear or anger. It was a bewildering, unfamiliar sensation. It felt like hope. Far above the industrial squalor, a sleek Republic diplomatic shuttle, the Endar Spire, cut through the smog. Inside its cockpit, Bastila Shan stared at the tactical display, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her brown Jedi robes were immaculate. She was the picture of Jedi discipline, but her hazel eyes betrayed a deep-seated intensity. "I'm telling you, Master Vandar," the signal was distinct, she said into her comm, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Two dark side signatures, strong ones, flaring up in this sector. Mercenaries, almost certainly the ones who raided the Paragus convoy. And handle this you must, young Bastila," came the reedy voice of the Jedi Master from the comm speaker. "But caution I advise. Nar Shaddaa is a treacherous place." "I am aware, Master. I have a squad of Republic troopers ready for deployment. We'll secure the area and apprehend them." Shan out. She cut the connection, her focus returning to the world below. Her senses were stretched out, a net cast into the turbulent ocean of the Force. She could feel the two dark side signatures she had been tracking. They were still there, but they were sputtering, weakened, and beneath them, around them, was something else. An echo. It was the same echo she had felt a week ago after the skirmish on Ord Mantell, and a month before that near the Rishi Maze. It wasn't light, it wasn't dark, it was still. It was a perfect, resonant silence where there should have been noise. A patch of calm water in the middle of a hurricane. It was powerful, immensely so, but it was passive, observational. Until now. Now, it felt active. It was like the silence had been given a voice, a will. "Take us down," she ordered her pilot. That warehouse. Standard approach. Hostile environment protocols. The shuttle descended, its landing gear deploying with a hydraulic hiss. It settled onto the ferrocrete landing pad across Fro. Warehouse 734. Just as the first wave of Hutt cartel enforcers arrived, their speeders screeching to a halt. Bastila strode down the shuttle's ramp, her lightsaber unlit but held ready in her hand. Republic trooper escort formed up around her. The scene was one of confusion. Dozens of freed slaves were scattering into the warren of alleys. Hutt enforcers were shouting, trying to restore order. Ignoring them, Bastila walked towards the warehouse, her senses focused. The two dark Jedi were inside, unconscious but alive. The rest of the slavers were similarly disabled, groaning on the floor. The work was precise, efficient, and strangely merciful. No one was dead, but the echo, the profound, serene signature, was fading. She cast her senses wide, pushing past the grime and fear of the moon, searching for that unique frequency. She caught it, a fleeting trail, heading down, deeper into the city's labyrinthine structure. It was moving away, taking a smaller, brighter spark of life with it. She ran to the edge of the loading bay, peering into the chasm of neon and steel below. For a split second, she thought she saw it. A flash of gold, a hint of blue, a figure turning a corner on a walkway 100 meters down. Then gone, swallowed by the shadows of the smuggler's moon. The echo vanished completely. Bastila Shan stood there, the acid rain beginning to soak the shoulders of her robes, her mind reeling. She had come here expecting to fight dark Jedi. Instead, she had found the aftermath of a miracle, and a mystery deeper and more profound than any she had ever encountered. Who could defeat two trained Darksiders without killing them? What power could feel so vast yet so calm? She looked at the empty cages, at the discarded lightsaber on the floor, at the terrified but free people melting back into the city. This was not the work of a Sith. It was not the work of a Jedi. It was something else entirely. And she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, that she had to find its source. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Dogma of Dantooine. The transition was a form of psychic whiplash. One moment, Bastila Shan's senses were immersed in the miasma of Nar Shaddaa, a rancid cocktail of ozone, desperation, and the lingering stink of Hutt sweat. The next, the shuttle broke atmosphere above Dantooine, and the galaxy shifted from a scream to a whisper. Below her, the world was a tapestry of rolling green savannas and patches of sapphire blue water, stitched together with the gentle, winding threads of rivers. The air that filtered into the cockpit as they descended was not the recycled metallic breath of a city moon but the rich, clean scent of alien soil, blooming cath hounds, and rain-washed leaves. It was the scent of peace. For her entire life, this transition had been a relief, a return to sanity from the chaos of the galaxy. It was the feeling of coming home. Today, it felt hollow. She stood from her co-pilot's seat, her Jedi robes settling around her with a soft rustle. She walked to the main viewport of the Endar Spire's bridge, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture of formal contemplation. The sprawling plains below, which always seemed a symbol of infinite possibility and the boundless nature of the Force, now looked merely empty. The serenity felt less like peace and more like willful ignorance. The galaxy was bleeding, the Sith were rising, and here, on Dantooine, the grass grew, and the Jedi Masters debated semantics. The echo she had pursued on Nar Shaddaa still resonated within her, a perfect, silent hum against the backdrop of her own thoughts. It was a benchmark against which her entire reality was now being measured, and her reality was being found wanting. She had spent the entire hyperlane journey back analyzing the data, her mind a whirlwind of contradictions. The two dark Jedi, now sedated in the ship's brig, had been neutralized with a level of precision that bordered on the surgical. Not a single fatal wound. Every strike had been disabling, targeting nerve clusters and joints. The freed slaves, when questioned, could only offer fragmented, awestruck accounts of a golden-haired man who moved like a phantom and a second identical man who had appeared from nowhere to release them. And then there was the energy signature of that impossible feat. The clone. Republic intelligence had no category for it. It wasn't a force projection, it had a physical, tangible presence. It wasn't a droid. No machine could replicate a force signature. It was as if this man, this Naruto, had literally torn a piece of himself away and given it independent, sentient life. Such a thing should have required a catastrophic expenditure of energy, an act that would have left even a Jedi Master drained for weeks. Yet the man's own force signature, the primary echo, had remained utterly placid, a deep and bottomless well of power, undisturbed by the miracle he had performed. "We are approaching the enclave, Nar Shaddaa." The pilot's voice cut through her reverie. "Acknowledged," Bastila replied, her voice a carefully modulated alto. She turned from the viewport, her face a mask of Jedi composure, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Have the prisoners prepped for transfer to the secure cells. I will report to the council immediately." She strode from the bridge, her boots making no sound on the deck plating. The halls of the enclave were as she always remembered them, cool, austere, and silent. The walls were made of polished, gray stone, adorned only with the faint, geometric patterns of the order. The light came from high, arched windows that looked out onto the serene landscape, but it did little to warm the cold finality of the architecture. It was a place built for contemplation, but it felt more like a fortress designed to keep the messiness of the galaxy at arm's length. She arrived at the doors to the council chamber. They were massive, carved from the hardwood of some ancient tree. And they swung open silently at her approach. The chamber was a circle. In the center of the room, 4 high-backed stone chairs were positioned, though only 2 were occupied. The other council members, including the esteemed Master Yoda, were off-world, their forms represented by shimmering blue holograms that flickered slightly in the afternoon light. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic window that formed the chamber's far wall, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Master Vrook Lamar, his face a permanent scowl etched into weathered features, sat with his arms crossed. His gaze as sharp and unforgiving as a shard of glass. He was the guardian of tradition, the unyielding bastion against any deviation from the Jedi Code. To his right, Master Vandar Tokare, the same diminutive species as the Grand Master, sat with his large eyes closed, his 3-fingered hands resting on the head of a Geimer stick. He was the Order's foremost philosopher, a being of immense wisdom. But a wisdom steeped in millennia of established dogma. Bastila walked to the center of the room and bowed deeply. "Masters, I have returned. So we see." Nar Shaddaa, Vrook's voice was a low grumble. "Like rocks grinding together. Your report was irregular. You were sent to apprehend 2 dark Jedi. You have done so, and yet, you speak of third parties and impossible energies. Elaboration is required." Bastila straightened, her gaze meeting Vrook's without flinching. "My report is accurate, Master Vrook. The Dark Jedi were defeated before we arrived. I found them in the slaver's. They were protecting completely incapacitated, but alive. The operation was dismantled by a single, unidentified force-sensitive individual. A vigilante," Vrook scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand. "The outer rim is full of them. Power without discipline, a dangerous combination. He should be brought in for judgment. With respect, Master, I do not believe vigilante adequately describes him," Bastila countered, her tone even. "The precision of the engagement suggests a level of training that rivals, and perhaps exceeds, our own. The lack of fatalities suggests a code, a restraint that is. Or a lack of conviction." Vrook interrupted. "The dark side preys on the indecisive. To confront evil and fail to extinguish it is a weakness that can be exploited." A heavy silence filled the room. Bastila held her tongue, knowing a direct confrontation with Vrook was fruitless. She turned her gaze to the other master. Master Vandar's eyes slowly opened. They were ancient, pupils like Dar-K galaxies swirling with patient thought. "A unique energy signature, you reported," he said, his voice soft but carrying immense weight. "Not of the light, nor of the dark. Describe this feeling, you must." Bastila paused, searching for words. This was the crux of it all. It was balanced, Master. It felt like quiet. Not the absence of the force, but the force in perfect equilibrium. "When I feel the light side in a place like this, it is a warm, uplifting presence. When I feel the dark side, it is a cold, corrupting pressure." This was neither. It was simply, is. It felt as solid and fundamental as gravity. Vrook snorted. "Metaphysical nonsense. The force is a duality. Light and dark, life and death. To suggest a middle path is a heresy, a path that leads only to self-deception and an eventual fall." "A clone, you also witnessed," Master Vandar continued, ignoring Vrook's outburst. "Solid, real, a perfect copy, you believe. The escaped slaves described it as such. And I felt its signature, Bastila affirmed. It was a perfect, smaller echo of the primary. It acted with independent thought and purpose. I know of no force technique that can accomplish such a thing. The stuff of Sith legends, Vrook said darkly. Forbidden arts, a perversion of life. This, sage, as you call him, is likely a new breed of Dark Lord, more subtle than the brutes like Malik, but all the more dangerous for it. He lulls you with mercy and parlor tricks while weaving a web of dark power. His power did not feel dark, Master, Bastila insisted, a sliver of her inner frustration bleeding into her voice. It felt clean, pure. The atmosphere in that warehouse was thick with the despair of the prisoners. His presence did not add to it, it negated it. It was like opening a window in a sealed, suffocating room. A dangerous perception, that is, Master Vandar cautioned gently. The dark side, subtle it can be. It can wear a mask of peace, of tranquility, to ensnare the unwary. Power, so great, a source it must have. If not from passion and rage, then from where? This was the question she had been asking herself. It was the flaw in the Jedi's own logic. They preached detachment from passion. Yet their own power was fueled by their devotion to the light, which was itself a form of passion. The Sith drew on anger and fear. Both sides drew from an extreme. This being, Naruto, seemed to draw power from the center. I do not know, Master, she admitted, her voice dropping slightly. But I believe it is imperative that we find out. The threat of Darth Malik and his empire grows daily. We are engaged in a galactic war that is stretching the order to its limits. An individual of this power, if he could be turned to our cause, could be our salvation or our doom, Vrook finished grimly. You are our most gifted practitioner of battle meditation, Bastila. Your mind is a weapon the Republic cannot afford to lose. We cannot risk you on a fool's errand, chasing ghost stories in the Outer Rim. It is no ghost story, Bastila said, her voice hardening with conviction. I felt it. It is real, and it is the single most powerful force signature I have ever encountered. To ignore it, as Master Vrook says, would be a weakness. It would be fear, and fear is the path to the dark side. She let her words hang in the air, a direct, deliberate echo of the Code's own teachings. Vrook's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He had been outmaneuvered. Master Vandar stroked his chin thoughtfully. Your conviction is strong, Knight Shan. A connection, you feel, to this being. It was not a question. I do, Master, she confirmed. I believe he represents a new factor in the equation of the Force. One that we must understand. After a long moment of silence, Master Vandar nodded slowly. Permission to investigate further, the Council grants you. But alone, you will go. Take a scout ship, not a capital ship. Be an observer, not a combatant. Learn, understand, but engage, you will not. Without our express command, too much is unknown. The risk, too great it is. Thank you, Masters. Bastila bowed again, a wave of relief washing over her. Do not thank us, Knight Shan, Vrook warned, his voice low. Just do not give us cause to regret this decision. 2 hours later, Bastila was in the meditation chamber deep within the heart of the enclave. The chamber was circular, like the council room. But where the latter was open and bright, this was enclosed and dark. The only light came from a softly glowing crystal at the center of the room and the complex holography. See displays that flickered to life around her as she settled onto a meditation cushion. This was her sanctuary and her battlefield. This was the home of her rarest gift, battle meditation. A technician, in a simple gray uniform gave her a respectful nod. We are ready when you are, Knight Shan. The simulation is loaded. Scenario Zeta 9. A Republic fleet defending the Duro shipyards from a Sith armada twice its size. Odds of success are calculated at 17%. Proceed, Bastila said, her voice calm. She closed her eyes. A lightweight neural feedback circlet was fitted around her temples. The holographic displays flared, showing a chaotic starfield littered with the green icons of Republic ships and the angry red triangles of the Sith fleet. She did not watch the display. She let her own senses sink, moving past the physical world, past the cool stone of the chamber, and into the Force. Her consciousness expanded, leaving her body behind. She soared through the simulated space, a being of pure thought. The battle erupted. She felt it all. The jarring thunder of turbolaser fire. The metallic shriek of a fighter wing being torn apart. The sudden, cold void where a frigate's crew had been snuffed out. She felt the grim determination of a Republic captain on the bridge of his flagship, the adrenaline-fueled fear of a rookie pilot on his first combat drop, the coordinated thoughts of a squadron of bombers as they began their attack run. And she felt the enemy. The cold, disciplined hatred of the Sith commander. The raw, bloodthirsty rage of the Sith fighter pilots. The unthinking obedience of the war droids. It was a discordant storm of will and emotion. Her gift was the ability to become the conductor of that storm. She reached out with her mind, not with commands, but with feelings. To the terrified rookie pilot, she sent a wave of calm, sharpening his focus, guiding his hands on the controls. His fear did not vanish, but it was forged into a weapon. To the grim captain, she offered a flash of insight, a premonition of the enemy's flanking maneuver, allowing him to reposition his shields just in time. She wove the minds of the bomber squadron together, her individual thoughts merging into a single, unified purpose. They moved as one, their targeting becoming impossibly precise. The Republic fleet, once on the verge of collapse, began to move with a preternatural grace. Ships moved in perfect sync, concentrating fire with devastating efficiency. Fighter wings anticipated enemy movements, transforming a desperate defense into a lethal counterattack. The tide of the battle began to turn. The 17% chance of success was climbing, 30, 40, 50%. But the cost was immense. To channel such hope and courage, she had to immerse herself in the fear and pain of her own side. She felt every death, every loss, as a sharp sting against her own soul. The effort was a staggering mental weight. This was the Jedi way of war, victory through sacrifice, order forged from pain. And then, in the heat of her focus, it happened. She reached for a deeper reserve of strength, a greater sense of clarity, and her mind brushed against the memory of the echo from Nar Shaddaa. That perfect, effortless balance. For a moment, she tried to replicate it. She tried to achieve this harmony not by forcing her will upon the battlefield, but by letting the battlefield's own rhythm flow through her. She tried to find the point of equilibrium between the Republic's desperate courage and the Sith's burning hate. The result was immediate and disastrous. The clarity shattered. The harmony she had built faltered. A squadron of fighters lost its cohesion, flying into the firing arc of a Sith cruiser. The flagship captain's premonitions became a confusing jumble of possibilities. Her connection, her control, flickered like a dying candle. The red icons on the holographic display began to overwhelm the green. With a gasp, Bastila wrenched her mind back to the Jedi way. Back to the familiar path of control and imposition of will. She grabbed the reins of the battle once more, pouring her own energy, her own spirit, into the fray. It was like fighting a riptide. A desperate struggle to regain command. She pushed herself to the limit, her body trembling with the strain, sweat beading on her brow. Slowly, agonizingly, she brought the fleet back into formation. She drove them forward, pushing them past their limits. They won. The simulation ended with the last Sith ship exploding into a silent, holographic fireball. The display showed the final result: Republic victory. Casualties: 68%. The technician's voice was filled with awe. Incredible, Knight Shan. No one has ever beaten that scenario. The council will be pleased. Bastila opened her eyes, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She felt drained, hollowed out, as if a part of her own life force had been spent to buy the victory. She had won the simulation, but in her heart, she had failed the true test. She had proven that the Jedi way worked, but she had also proven its terrible, crushing cost. The other path, the one she had briefly touched and failed to grasp, had felt effortless. Its power was not drawn from a struggle between two sides, but from the union of all things. She knew then, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the Jedi were fighting with a broken sword. They were trying to win a war by acknowledging only half of the battlefield. The Jedi archives were a place of profound silence, a silence composed of the weight of 30,000 years of history. It was a multi-leveled rotunda, its walls lined not with books but with glowing holocrons, ancient scrolls preserved in stasis fields, and countless rows of databanks. The air hummed with the faint, almost subliminal thrum of stored knowledge. Bastila walked past alcoves containing the teachings of Odin and the war records of the Great Hyperspace War. She sought something far older. An artifact from before the modern Jedi-Sith schism, from a time when the understanding of the Force was more art than science. She found it in a shielded alcove in the lowest level, the cartograph of resonances. It was not a holocron in the traditional sense. It was a smooth, featureless sphere of obsidian, floating a few centimeters above its pedestal, absorbing all light. It as said to have been crafted by the very first Jedi explorers to map the Force itself, to find the places where it was strongest, the nexuses of life. Placing her fingertips on the cool, smooth surface, she closed her eyes. The Council had given her permission, but this was her own quest now. She had to find the source of that echo, if only to prove to herself that a better way was possible. She reached into her memory, past the trauma of the battle simulation, past the stern faces of the Council. She sought the feeling of Nar Shaddaa, not the chaos or the filth, but that one, singular note of perfect harmony. It was like trying to recall a specific melody from a symphony heard only once. She filtered out everything else, the blaster fire, mission's fear, the dark Jedi's rage, until only the echo remained. She focused her will and pushed the memory, the feeling, into the cartograph. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the obsidian sphere began to glow from within. A soft, golden light pulsed, and a three-dimensional star map bloomed in the air above it, a miniature galaxy of shimmering stars and swirling nebulae. But this map was different. It did not show hyperlanes or political borders. It showed lines of energy, rivers of the Force flowing between worlds. Some planets were brilliant beacons of the light side, like Dantooine. Others were black holes of the dark side, like Korriban. And then, a single point of light appeared that was neither. In a little traveled sector called the Gordian Reach, on the edge of the unknown regions, one star system flared to life. As the map zoomed in, it centered on a specific planet, a gas giant ringed by moons. One of those moons began to glow with a brilliant, steady, golden light that was an exact match for the signature she had felt. It pulsed with a power that made the light of Dantooine seem dim and the darkness of Korriban seem shallow. It was a sun of pure, balanced Force energy. Below the celestial body, glowing letters formed in the air, Yavin 4. A breath escaped Bastila's lips. She had her destination. She had her heading. Her ship, the Starlight Interceptor, was a small, state-of-the-art scout vessel, its engines modified for speed and stealth. The journey to the Gordian Reach was long, and she spent it in meditation, trying to prepare herself for what she might find. As the ship dropped out of hyperspace, the gas giant of Yavin Prime filled the viewport, a swirling vortex of orange and red clouds. And orbiting it, cloaked in mist, was the fourth moon. Yavin 4. Her sensors registered no technology, no cities, no landing pads. Only a single, biosphere, teeming with a level of life that was off the charts. And a Force signature that blanketed the entire moon. It washed over her as her ship entered the atmosphere. A tangible presence that was so immense it was breathtaking. It was the echo from Nar Shaddaa magnified 1,000-fold. It was the feeling of a vibrant, living jungle, of ancient, sleeping stone, of predators and prey. Of life and death, all existing in a perfect, unassailable harmony. There was no conflict here. There was only the cycle. It was the most purely forceful place she had ever been. She found a clearing in the dense, jungle canopy and set the interceptor down. The moment the ramp lowered, the air that filled the ship was thick, humid, and alive. The sound was a chiroo of 1,000 alien insects and the calls of unseen beasts. She walked down the ramp, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth. Before her stood a temple. It was colossal, a step pyramid of ancient, vine-choked stone. It was clearly a product of the long-dead Sith, the Massa Sea, and yet it did not radiate darkness. The overwhelming Force presence seemed to have cleansed it, purified it, turning a monument of hate into a sanctuary of peace. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the calm certainty of her purpose. She walked towards the temple's entrance, her senses on high alert. She felt a single, concentrated presence within. The sun at the center of this system of power. She entered the great archway and her breath caught. The central chamber was vast, open to the sky. But it was not empty. It was a garden, much like the one whispered about on Nar Shaddaa, but grander. Trees grew from the stone floor. Waterfalls cascaded down the temple walls into pools filled with glowing fish. The air was sweet with the scent of alien blossoms. And in the very center of the chamber, floating a meter above the floor in a cross-legged meditative pose, was a man with hair like spun gold. A faint, golden aura, visible even to the naked eye, pulsed gently around him. It was him, the source. As if sensing her presence, his meditation broke. The golden aura faded, and he lowered himself silently to the ground. He opened his eyes, and the brilliant, clear blue of them seemed to pierce through her Jedi composure, seeing all the turmoil and questions she carried within her. He offered a small, knowing smile. I was wondering when you would arrive, Knight of the Republic. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Sermon on the Moon. The silence that followed Naruto's statement was not empty. It was a vast, breathing thing, filled with the thrum of the living jungle and the weight of Bastila Shan's unspoken questions. Her Jedi training, 30 years of ingrained discipline, screamed at her to assume a defensive posture, to demand answers, to classify the being before her as friend or foe. Her hand, of its own accord, drifted to the cylindrical hilt of the lightsaber at her belt. A familiar anchor in a sea of overwhelming uncertainty. I am Knight Bastila Shan of the Jedi Order, she announced, her voice a precise, formal instrument cutting through the humid air. This moon is a known nexus of force energy, and this temple a relic of the ancient Sith. By what authority do you reside here? Naruto's placid expression didn't shift. There was no defensiveness in his posture. No hint of aggression in the force signature that washed around him like a calm sea. He simply tilted his head, a gesture of mild curiosity. Authority, he repeated, the word sounding strange on his tongue. The authority of a gardener who found an abandoned plot and decided to grow things. This place was filled with echoes of pain. I thought it could use some life. Before Bastila could formulate a response to this bafflingly simple explanation, a new voice, sharp and laced with suspicion, joined the conversation. Hey, who's the stiff in the bathrobe? Mission Vao emerged, from behind a towering stone pillar overgrown with luminous blue moss. She was holding a large, purple fruit with a spiky rind, which she was munching on with a connoisseur's focus. She had changed out of her prisoner's rags and into a simple tunic and trousers that Naruto had provided, but her posture was still coiled and wary. She placed herself slightly behind Naruto, her violet eyes narrowing as she sized Bastila up. The Twi'lek girl was a splash of vibrant, chaotic color in a scene that had, until now, been one of majestic stillness. This is Knight Bastila Shan, Naruto said, his tone patient. He gestured towards Mission. Bastila, this is Mission Vao. A recent business associate. I'm not your associate, Blondie, I'm your hostage/guest/whatever, Mission corrected, pointing at him with her half-eaten fruit. And I don't like the look of this one. She's got the same, I'm better than you, vibe as the jerks who ran the enclave on Terrace. You a Jedi? She asked Bastila directly, her voice dripping with the ingrained disrespect of the galactic underclass. I am, Bastila replied, her composure strained. She was a respected knight, a war hero, accustomed to deference. Being addressed like a low-level security droid by a teenage urchin was jarring. Knew it, Mission muttered, taking another large bite of fruit. You people are all the same. Show up after the troob. Lease over and act like you own the place. Naruto chuckled, a low, warm sound. Mission has a healthy skepticism of institutional authority. You'll have to forgive her. He turned his full attention back to Bastila, his blue eyes holding hers. You have questions, many of them. I can feel them churning in your mind like a school of Firaxan sharks. Please, ask. He gestured towards a set of smooth, flat-topped rocks near one of the cascading waterfalls. It was an invitation, casual and disarming. Against her better judgment, Bastila found herself relaxing her stance. A direct confrontation felt absurdly out of place here. This was not a fortress, it was a sanctuary. She walked over and sat on one of the rocks, her back straight, a perfect model of Jedi decorum. Naruto sat opposite her, folding his legs into the same easy meditative posture she had first seen him in. Mission, after a moment's hesitation, plopped down on a patch of soft moss nearby, watching them both like a hawk. The event on Nar Shaddaa, Bastila began, her voice regaining its professional cadence. You created a duplicate of yourself. A solid, sentient being that radiated its own force signature. Such a thing is considered impossible. Is it? Naruto asked genuinely. Your ship is made of metal pulled from a planet's core. Your clothes are made of fibers grown on another. You drink water that was once part of a nebula. All the galaxy does is reshape energy and matter into new forms. I just do it with my own energy. It's no more impossible than building a droid. It just requires a different set of tools. The Force is not a tool. Bastila countered, the words a reflexive defense of her faith. It is a mystical energy field that binds the galaxy together. To treat it as a personal resource is the path of the Sith. Naruto's smile was gentle, tinged with something that looked like pity. You see the ocean and believe you must either sail on top of it or be drowned by it. You never consider that you are made of water. The Force isn't outside of you, Knight Shan. It is you, your breath, your blood, the firing of the synapses in your brain. The only distinction is one of awareness. He leaned forward and plucked a small, brown, withered leaf from a nearby fern. He held it in his open palm. Your Jedi code teaches you to be passive, to let the Force guide you. A commendable, if incomplete, philosophy. The Sith believe in bending the Force to their will, in forcing their rage and passion upon it. An arrogant and self-destructive path. He closed his hand around the dead leaf. Bastila felt a subtle shift in the energy around him. It was not a grand, dramatic display. It was an intimate, focused flow. She could feel his own life energy, that bright, golden signature, mingling with the vast, ambient power of the moon itself. He wasn't commanding the Force. He was cooperating with it. He offered his own vitality, and the force of Yavin 4 seemed to respond in kind, amplifying it, nurturing it. He opened his hand. On his palm lay not a dead leaf, but a vibrant, green shoot, unfurling its tiny leaves towards the light filtering down from above. There is a third path, Naruto said softly. The path of harmony. You don't command the Force, and you don't surrender to it. You engage with it, you listen to its needs and tell it your own, and you find a balance. This plant needed life. I had life to give. The Force was the bridge that allowed the exchange. Bastila stared at the new shoot, her mind struggling to process the staggering implications. You healed it. Healing implies it was broken, Naruto corrected. It was simply at the end of its cycle. I encouraged it to start a new one. So, you can just make things not die. Mission asked, her skepticism warring with the clear evidence before her eyes. Could you do that to a person? Naruto's gaze shifted to her, and his expression became more somber. Death is a part of the cycle. It is necessary. It creates the soil from which new life grows. To deny death entirely is to deny life its meaning. It is the ultimate act of disharmony. An act of theft from the Force itself. But a life that is not yet ready to end. A spirit that still burns brightly but is trapped in a failing vessel. For that, a bargain can sometimes be struck. He had just articulated the core heresy that had led to the fall of countless Jedi. The obsession with immortality that was the ultimate lure of the dark side. Yet, coming from him, it sounded not like a temptation, but like a profound, natural law. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. A large, reptilian creature. Easily 3 meters long with a ridge of sharp spines down its back and a jaw full of wicked-looking teeth, had lumbered into the temple chamber. It was a native Yavin predator, a Gundark. Its reptilian eyes fixing on the small group with predatory intelligence. Mission yelped and scrambled behind Naruto. Bastila's hand flew to her lightsaber, her thumb hovering over the ignition switch. Her body tensed, ready for combat. Naruto didn't move. He simply turned his head to look at the Gundark. He did not project fear, nor did he project a command. Bastila, her senses wide open, could feel what he was doing. He was projecting nothing. An aura of complete and utter non-aggression. He sent a feeling of simple acknowledgement, a silent message that said, I see you. I am not a threat. I am not food. I am just a part of this place, like the stones and the trees. The Gundark tilted its massive head, its nostrils flaring as it tasted the air. It took a step closer, letting out a low growl that vibrated through the stone floor. Bastila's knuckles were white on her saber hilt. Naruto remained perfectly still. He did not try to dominate the creature's mind with a Jedi beast control trick. He did not try to intimidate it. He simply existed. He accepted its presence without fear, and in doing so, he gave it no reason to be aggressive. After a long, tense moment, the Gundark seemed to lose interest. It snorted, turned, and ambled away, disappearing back into the lush foliage at the temple's edge. Bastila slowly lowered her hand, her heart still beating a rapid rhythm. "How did you do that?" she whispered. "I did nothing," Naruto replied. "It came, it saw, it left. It was looking for a fight, or a meal. I offered it neither. Your fear, your readiness to do battle. That is what it would have responded to. You were speaking its language. I chose to remain silent." He turned back to her, his gaze penetrating. "You live in a galaxy of opposites, Night Shan. Light and dark, Jedi and Sith, life and death, good and evil. You build walls between these concepts and declare one side holy and the other profane. But you are wrong. They are not opposites. They are partners. Two sides of the same coin. The Force is not a war to be won, it is a balance to be maintained. It's okay to be pissed off sometimes, then." Mission blurted out, seemingly unable to contain the question. "Because those Jedi on Terrace told my buddy Zaylan that his anger at the gangs who took his paw would lead him to the dark side. He tried to suppress it. Got himself killed because he hesitated." Naruto's expression softened as he looked at Mission. "Your friend wasn't wrong to be angry, Mission. His anger was a sign that he loved his father, a sign that he knew a great injustice had occurred. That anger was a source of power. A fire. The Jedi told him to douse the fire, fearing he would get burned. A Sith would have told him to become a wildfire and burn down the whole city. The path of harmony teaches you to become the smith. To take that fire, build a forge, and use that heat to shape your anger into a sort of focused, righteous will. Your emotions are not your enemies. They are your allies. You must learn to listen to them, not silence them or be ruled by them." His words struck Bastila like a physical blow. The battle meditation simulation, her attempt to find harmony between the two sides, and her catastrophic failure, the crushing weight of the casualties. Naruto seemed to read her thoughts. "You command great battles from a distance, Night Shan. You touch the minds of thousands. You feel their courage and their fear. You use their passion to win your wars. And yet, you are taught to fear those same passions in yourself. You feel the dissonance, don't you? The hypocrisy. You fear the storm in your own soul, so you try to cage it. But a caged storm only grows stronger, until it shatters the cage entirely. The dark side is a real and present danger," Bastila countered weakly. The argument sounding feeble even to her own ears. "Passion leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering." A clever mantra, Naruto acknowledged. But it is a half-truth. Passion can also lead to creation. Anger can lead to change. Hate is a poison, I will grant you that. It is an emotion that has forgotten its purpose and begun to consume its host. It is the result of a profound imbalance. But the Jedi solution is to amputate the limb because you fear the infection. I am telling you to learn how to heal it." He stood up and walked towards the center of the temple garden. His back to her. "Your Jedi Order has grown stagnant. It hides from the universe, clinging to a rigid dogma because it fears what it cannot control. The Sith are no better. They seek to dominate the universe, to enslave it to their passions because they fear their own insignificance. Both are driven by fear. Both are imbalanced, and the galaxy is caught in the crossfire of their childish squabble." He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with a power that was ancient and absolute. "I offer a third way. Not the sterile emptiness of the light or the ravenous chaos of the dark. But the fullness, the whole, the path of harmony. It is a harder path, for it requires you to confront every part of yourself, to embrace the storm and the silence, the predator and the prey, the life and the death. It requires you to be honest with yourself in a way neither Jedi nor Sith have been for millennia." Bastila was speechless. Every word he spoke resonated with a truth she had felt but never dared to articulate. It was the answer to the hollowness she felt, the key to the echo she had been chasing across the galaxy. It was in that moment of profound revelation that the harmony of Yavin 4 was violently shattered. A piercing shriek echoed through the Force, a discordant note of pure malice and disciplined hate. Naruto's head snapped up, his serene expression vanishing, replaced by one of weary annoyance. "It seems," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, that some people don't appreciate a quiet neighborhood. Above the temple, the sky darkened as a ship materialized from thin air. It was a Sith infiltrator, a predator of matte black metal and sharp angles, its stealth field disengaging. Hatches slid open, and a dozen figures began to rappel down on cables. They were elite Sith commandos in black and red armor, their movements ruthlessly efficient. They were followed by a squadron of heavily armed war droids that landed with heavy, metallic thuds. On the bridge of the infiltrator, a tall, imposing figure watched on the viewscreen, his presence a spike of cold, focused hatred that Bastila could feel even from the ground. He wore the black robes of a Sith Lord, and a chillingly ornate mask covered his face. This was not a random scouting party. This was an assassination squad. The Nexus is strong here, the Sith Lord, Vornax, hissed to his pilot. The Sage is here. Secure the temple. Leave no one alive. Malik wills it. Down below, the commandos and droids formed a perimeter, their blasters raised. Bastila was on her feet in an instant, yellow lightsaber igniting with a sharp snap hiss, casting a warm glow on the ancient stones. She fell into the classic defensive stance of Form 3, Sorzu, her body a coiled spring of readiness. Sith, she yelled. Mission. Her face pale with terror, fumbled for the customized hold-out blaster Naruto had given her and scrambled behind a thick, vine-covered pillar. The Sith forces opened fire. A storm of red energy bolts converged on their position. But before the first bolt could reach them, Naruto stomped his right foot on the stone floor. It was not a dramatic, earth-shaking gesture, but the effect was instantaneous. The very ground of the temple erupted. Thick, gnarled vines, as thick as a man's arm, burst from the cracks in the floor, lashing out with sentient intent. They wrapped around the legs of war droids, pulling them crashing to the ground. They ensnared the feet of commandos, sending them stumbling. The living temple had become his weapon. Bastila. Naruto's voice was calm but held a new edge of command. Hold the center. Mission. Suppressive fire on the droids. Bastila didn't need to be told twice. She became a whirlwind of yellow light, a bastion against the tide. Her Sorzu form was perfect. A nearly impenetrable defense. She deflected blaster bolts back at their shooters with uncanny accuracy, the sizzle of her blade a sharp counterpoint to the chaos. A commando broke through the vine barrier. His vibrosword raised. She met him in a shower of sparks, her movements economical and precise, disarming and disabling him in a matter of seconds. Mission, from the safety of her cover, began firing methodical, targeted shots. One bolt took out a droid's optical sensor. Another hit the exposed power cell on a commando's back, causing his armor to spark and seize up. She was terrified, but she was a survivor. She fought smart, not hard. And Naruto became a force of nature. He moved through the battlefield like a ghost. He didn't ignite a lightsaber. He didn't need one. His hands and feet began to glow with a faint, golden aura of condensed energy. He flowed around the Sith attacks, his movements fluid and unpredictable. He met a charging commando, sidestepped his clumsy strike, and tapped him once on the helmet with 2 fingers. The commando collapsed, his systems shorted out. Then, to Bastila's utter astonishment, Naruto pressed his palms together in a simple cross-shaped seal. There was a soft poof of displaced air, and 2 perfect duplicates of him appeared on either side. Shadow clones. One immediately sprinted to Bastila's side, its movements identical to the originals, and began engaging the Sith with a breathtaking display of taijutsu, creating an opening for her. The other clone darted towards Mission's position, intercepting a squad that was trying to flank her, its movements a blur of disabling strikes. The Sith Lord, Vornax, saw his forces being dismantled with contemptuous ease. His rage focused on the one causing it all. With a roar, he leapt from the infiltrator's boarding ramp, his own crimson lightsaber igniting as he fell. He landed heavily, the stone cracking under his boots, and charged directly at the original Naruto. You defile this place, heretic. Vornax bellowed, his voice a metallic rasp from behind his mask. He swung his saber in a brutal, powerful arc meant to cleave Naruto in 2. Naruto met the attack with an eerie calm. He didn't dodge. As the crimson blade descended, he raised his right forearm to block it. His arm glowed with a blindingly bright golden energy, forming a solid shield. The lightsaber connected with a deafening crack of energy, spraying sparks everywhere. Vornax's blade was stopped dead. The Sith Lord stared in disbelief. Before he could recover, Naruto's left hand came up. In his palm, a sphere of swirling, chaotic blue energy had formed, howling like a miniature hurricane. A Rasengan. Harmony, Naruto said, his voice barely a whisper, is a beautiful thing. He thrust the sphere forward, pressing it into Vornax's chestplate. The impact was not an explosion. It was a grinding, focused vortex of absolute power. Vornax's armor didn't just break, it was pulverized, twisted, and torn apart. The Sith Lord was thrown backwards as if hit by a freight train, tumbling through the air before crashing into the temple wall with enough force to shatter the stone. He collapsed in a heap. His mask cracked, his connection to the Force scrambled into a mess of static and pain. The remaining Sith stared in horror at their defeated leader. The battle was over. Naruto let the Rasengan in his hand dissipate. He took a deep breath, and the golden glow around his fists faded. The two clones, their work done, vanished in puffs of smoke. It was then that a high-pitched whine filled the air. One of the droids, crippled but not destroyed, initiated its self-destruct sequence. Its core began to glow a furious, pulsing red. It lay near the edge of the temple, parallel close to where Bastila had landed the Starlight Interceptor. "Look out!" Mission screamed. Naruto moved, but it was too late. The droid exploded in a blinding flash of light and a wave of concussive force. Shrapnel tore through the air. A large piece of twisted metal, white-hot from the blast, cartwheeled through the air and slammed into the side of Bastila's scout ship. It punched clean through the port's side engine nacelle. The battle was won, but the silence that followed was broken by the ominous hiss of leaking coolant and the sputtering death of a hyperdrive motivator. Bastila deactivated her lightsaber, the snap hiss of its retraction deafeningly loud. She stood amidst the defeated Sith, the twitching droids, and the now peaceful vines. She looked at Mission, who was peering out from behind her pillar. Shaken but unharmed, she looked at the broken form of the Sith Lord, defeated not with a lightsaber but with a power she couldn't comprehend. And she looked at Naruto, who was calmly walking towards her. His face a mask of serene focus. They were victorious, they were safe, and they were stranded. The sheer scale of what she had just witnessed finally overwhelmed the dam of her Jedi training. The philosophy, the power, the effortless control, the casual defiance of everything she knew to be possible. It all coalesced into a single, soul-shaking point of utter awe. Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. "What are you?" Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Mandalorian Wager. The silence in the wake of the explosion was a thick, syrupy thing, broken only by the ominous hiss of vaporizing coolant. Naruto stood amidst the subdued Sith and the wreckage of their droids, his serene expression for once showing a flicker of irritation. Bastila, her lightsaber powered down but still clutched in a white-knuckled grip, stared at the smoking gash in the side of her ship, the Starlight Interceptor. The clean, elegant lines of the Republic vessel were now marred by a brutal, jagged wound. "Report," she commanded, her voice tight, striding towards the damaged ship. Her Jedi calm was a thin veneer over a simmering frustration. Mission Vow, scampering out from behind her pillar, was already halfway up the ramp. With the instincts of a seasoned slicer and ship rat, she dove into the access panel beneath the wound, her small hands pulling out burned wires and scorched power conduits. "Oh, this is bad," she chirped, her voice muffled. "Real bad. Like selling your own grandmother for scrap, bad." Bastila reached the cockpit, her Finge RS flying over the holographic control panel. Red warning icons flashed across the screen like a virulent rash. Hull breach. Port engine offline. Coolant system failure. Hyperdrive motivator destroyed. She slammed her palm down on the console, a rare crack in her stoic facade. "Kriff," she swore, the un-Jedi-like curse slipping out before she could stop it. Mission poked her head out from the panel, her face smudged with soot. "You can say that again, bathrobe. The motivator is slag, the primary coolant line is ruptured, and the navicomputer got scrambled by the feedback loop. We're not just stuck here, we're deaf, dumb, and blind. We couldn't plot a course to the outhouse right now." Naruto joined them, his gaze not on the flashing warnings, but on the ship itself. He placed a hand on the cold metal of the bulkhead. Closing his eyes, he wasn't a mechanic, but he understood systems. He could feel the flow of energy, the intricate dance of machinery that gave a thing life. What he felt from the Starlight Interceptor was a shuddering, broken rhythm, a discordant song of pain. She is deeply wounded, he said, his voice low. The core of her ability to travel is shattered. She needs more than simple repairs. She needs a new heart. A new hyperdrive motivator, Bastila corrected, running a hand over her face in exasperation. Which we are not going to find in a Sith temple on an uncharted jungle moon. I'll have to send a long-range distress signal to the Republic. It could take weeks, even months, for them to mount a rescue mission this deep in the Outer Rim. Are you crazy? Mission yelped, jumping down to the deck. Sending a distress call from here is like putting up a giant neon sign that says, "Free lunch." For every pirate, slaver, and monster in a 10-parsec radius. We'd be fending off scavengers with sticks before your Republic buddies even finished their morning tea. She gestured wildly at the teeming jungle outside. And that's not even counting whatever things with big, pointy teeth live out there. We saw that Gundark thing. We can't just sit here. The two women began to argue, Bastila defending the necessity of Republic protocol, mission countering the brutal realities of survival in the lawless fringes of the galaxy. Naruto listened, his head tilted. Both were right. Bastila's path was safe but slow, a passive wait for rescue that ignored the immediate dangers. Mission's path was one of immediate, panicked action without a clear direction. Both were incomplete. He raised a hand, and the simple gesture was enough to bring their argument to a halt. There is another way, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. He turned his gaze towards the sky, though his eyes seemed to be looking at something much farther away. He was extending his senses. Not just through the force of the moon, but beyond it, into the void of the system. He let the chaotic, vibrant life song of Yavin 4 fade into the background, searching for something else. He was searching for a different kind of music. The music of civilization. He found it. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. On a nearby moon, obscured by swirling gases, he sensed it. Not the sprawling, chaotic signature of a metropolis, nor the cold, sterile feel of an imperial outpost. This was something else. It was sharp, disciplined, and orderly. It was the feeling of 100 wills forged into one. A psychic signature that hummed with martial pride and a dangerous, predatory stillness. It felt like a clan of sleeping wolves. There, he said, pointing towards a section of the sky. Here the great gas giant Yavin Prime loomed. The moon orbiting closest to the planet. There are people there. A settlement. Disciplined. Organized. They will have technology. They may have the parts we need. Bastila pulled up the system chart on the main display. Her eyes widened. That's DXUN. The Demon Moon. The charts are centuries old, but they're filled with warnings. Unstable orbit. Lethal indigenous life forms. Extreme magnetic interference. It's listed as uninhabitable. The charts are wrong, Naruto stated with simple finality. There are people there. It is our only viable, immediate option. The sublight engines are still functional, are they not? Bastila checked her console. Barely. We have enough power for one short hop within the system. But to fly into that chaos, based on a feeling. My feelings have gotten me this far, Naruto said, a faint smile on his lips. And they got Mission out of a cage and you out of a fight with a Sith Lord. I suggest we trust them. Bastila looked from Naruto's confident face to Mission's hopeful one, then back at the grim list of her ship's failures. Protocol and logic screamed at her to stay put. But the man who had reshaped her understanding of the Force was offering a path forward. To reject it felt like an act of cowardice. Fine, she sighed, collapsing into the pilot's seat. Strap yourselves in. This is going to be rough. The journey was a controlled fall. The Starlight Interceptor shuddered and groaned as it clawed its way out of Yavin 4's atmosphere, its one good engine whining in protest. Alarms blared a constant, nerve-shredding symphony of imminent failure. As they approached DXUN, the ship was seized by the moon's turbulent atmosphere, tossing them about the cockpit like a child's toy. Through the viewport, DXUN was a terrifying spectacle. It was a world cloaked in a perpetual, sickly green twilight, its surface a near unbroken canopy of colossal, primeval jungle. Jagged canyons cut through the landscape like open wounds, and flashes of lightning from the upper atmosphere illuminated the shapes of monstrous, winged creatures circling in the gloom. I'm picking up a concentrated energy source, Bastila said, her hands fighting the controls. Shielded, tucked into the lee of that mountain range. It's got to be them. She guided the crippled ship down, the landing a barely controlled crash. Hay came to a halt in a clearing of dark, muddy earth, surrounded by flora that looked like it could eat a man whole. A few hundred meters away, nestled against the sheer rock face of a cliff, was the settlement. It was a brutalist collection of prefabricated metallic structures, surrounded by a shimmering energy fence and dotted with automated turrets that swiveled to track their arrival. It was less a town and more a military fortress, a stark monument of function over form that screamed, "You are not welcome here." The moment their ramp lowered, they were met by a reception committee. A dozen figures in full, fearsome Mandalorian armor materialized from the jungle, their helmets impassive, the T-shaped visors hiding all emotion. They carried heavy blaster rifles, and every single was aimed directly at the three figures standing on the ramp. This was a bad idea, Mission whispered, trying to make herself as small as possible behind Naruto. From the fortress gate, another figure emerged. This one walked with an authority the others lacked. The armor was a deep, burnished crimson, scarred and pitted from countless battles. The figure stopped 20 paces from the ship and, with a hiss of pneumatics, removed their helmet. It was a woman. Her face was sharp and angular, framed by short chopped black hair. A network of faint scars decorated one side of her face, testament to a life lived at the edge of a blade. Her eyes, a piercing, intelligent gray, were as cold and hard as neutron stars. She was battle-hardened, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. "You have 60 seconds to state your name, your ship's designation, and your purpose on my moon," the woman said, her voice a clear, commanding contralto, amplified slightly by her helmet's comm system. "After which, my defense cannons will turn your crippled transport into a memorial crater." "The clock is ticking." Bastila stepped forward, her Jedi training taking over. "I am Knight Bastila Shan of the Galactic Republic. This vessel is the Starlight Interceptor. We are on a diplomatic mission and have been stranded by an enemy attack. We request aid and assistance under the Mutual Protection Articles. The Republic has no authority here, Jedi." The woman cut her off, her tone dripping with contempt. The word, Jedi, was an insult. "Your articles are worthless scraps of flimsy. You have 40 seconds. Naruto placed a calming hand on Bastila's shoulder before stepping forward himself. He met the Mandalorian leader's gaze without fear, his posture relaxed but ready. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. We are travelers, not soldiers. Our ship is broken, and we need parts to repair it. We are not here to ask for charity. We wish to trade." The woman's eyebrow arched in faint surprise. She took in Naruto's simple clothing, his lack of armor or visible weapons, and his utter calm in the face of a dozen leveled blasters. She then looked at Bastila, her lip curling in a slight sneer. "You travel with a Jedi, and a Ruti, an outsider to our ways. Why should I believe you are not a Republic spy?" "Because spies don't crash land in ships held together by hope and prayer," Naruto replied easily. "And because I am giving you my word. We are simply travelers in need." The woman, Mira Keldau, leader of the Keldau clan, let a slow, dangerous smile grace her lips. "Your word is as worthless as the Jedi's treaties. Here on DXUN, we have only one currency that matters. Strength. We value one thing above all else. The resolve of a warrior. Manda, you want our help. You want to earn the right to stand on our ground and breathe our air. Then you will prove you are worth it." She pointed a gauntleted finger at Naruto. "You speak for them. You will fight for them. You will face me in the Kata, the Circle of Honor. Just you and me, no tricks, no Jedi magic," she said, her eyes flicking to Bastila. "Just skill against skill, will against will. If you win, you have earned my respect, and we will discuss a trade. If you lose," she left the threat hanging in the humid air. "The offer is final." Bastila gasped. "This is barbaric. We will not." "I accept," Naruto said, his voice cutting cleanly through Bastila's protest. A murmur went through the assembled Mandalorians. Myra's smile widened. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that. The Kata was a pit. A circular arena of dark, packed earth, about 30 meters in diameter. Dug into the center of the outpost. The entire Keldao clan, nearly 200 Mandalorians in their multicolored armor, had gathered to watch, their impassive helmets forming a solid wall of silent judgment. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, hot metal, and anticipation. Naruto stood in the center of the circle, stripped to his black tunic and gray pants. Across from him, Mira Keldao did her final weapon checks. She had removed her helmet, laying it carefully on a rack at the edge of the pit. Her gray eyes were alight with a fierce, competitive fire. "The rules are simple, Aruti," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet arena. "One of us yields, or is unable to continue. No killing. This is a test of skill, not an execution." She flexed her hands, the durasteel gauntlets creaking. "Ready." From the sidelines, Bastila watched with a sense of dread. She couldn't feel Naruto drawing on the force. He was holding back, honoring the terms of the duel. He was facing a master of Mandalorian combat, armed to the teeth, with nothing but his own body. It was suicide. Mission stood beside her, chewing nervously on her thumb, her earlier bravado gone. "Ready," Naruto replied, his voice calm. He settled into a low, fluid stance that was unfamiliar to Bastila, his hands open, his body poised like a hunting feline. Mira began the assault. She didn't charge. She raised her left wrist, and a small blaster fired a trio of stun bolts. It was a test of his reflexes. Naruto didn't dodge. He moved. In a blur of motion too fast to properly track, he swayed, twisted, and ducked. The stun bolts searing the air where he had been a microsecond before. He hadn't used the force to anticipate the shots. He had watched the subtle shift in Myra's shoulder muscles the instant before she fired. Myra's eyes widened slightly. Impressive. She brought up her right wrist, and a thin, monomolecular whipcord hissed through the air, aiming to entangle his legs. Naruto leapt, performing a full, spinning somersault over the whipcord, landing silently on the balls of his feet. Enough games. Mira activated the vibroblades concealed in her gauntlets. With a low hum, twin blades of shimmering, energized metal extended over her fists. She charged, her movements a model of brutal efficiency. What followed was a dance of violence. Mira was a storm of calculated fury, her blades a whirlwind of silver light. She struck with power and precision, each slash and stab aimed at a vital point. Any one of her strikes could have disemboweled him. Naruto was the leaf in that storm. He met her assault not with force, but with flow. He parried her deadly blades with his open hands, his forearms, the soles of his boots. He wasn't blocking the blows head-on, which would have shattered his bones, but redirecting their trajectory with the slightest touch, using her own momentum against her. It was the epitome of the soft style of combat, a taijutsu that was deceptively gentle yet devastatingly effective. He was taking hits. A glancing blow from her armored boot sent him staggering back. The edge of her gauntlet caught him on the ribs, and he grunted in pain, a bruise surely forming. This wasn't the effortless dominance he'd shown against the Sith. This was a real fight, a struggle of flesh and blood against steel and technology. Mira pressed her advantage, sensing she had drawn blood. She unleashed a furious combination, forcing Naruto onto the defensive. He was weaving, dodging, deflecting, but he was steadily being driven back towards the edge of the circle. The clan watched in silence, their collective gaze unwavering. "He is losing," Bastila breathed, her hand instinctively going to her saber. She could end this. A simple force push. "Don't," Mission hissed, grabbing her arm. He knew what he was getting into. "You interfere, they'll kill us all." Mira saw her opening. She feinted with her left blade, and as Naruto moved to block, she drove her right blade forward in a powerful thrust aimed straight for his heart. It was a classic, fatal maneuver. But it was what Naruto had been waiting for. As the blade shot towards him, he didn't dodge back. He moved in. In a movement that seemed to defy logic, he twisted his body, allowing the blade to skim past his side, close enough to tear his tunic. In that same instant, his hands became a blur. His right hand shot under Myra's arm, locking her elbow joint. His left hand snaked around her back, grabbing her shoulder. Using his hip as a fulcrum, he pivoted. Myra's world turned upside down. Her own forward momentum was used against her. And she was thrown over his shoulder in a perfect, arcing throw. She landed on her back with a tremendous crash that knocked the wind from her lungs. Before she could even process the reversal, Naruto was on her, a knee pressed lightly on her chestplate, his right hand held open, the fingertips hovering a single, trembling centimeter from her throat. Checkmate. The entire duel, from start to finish, had lasted less than 2 minutes. A stunned silence descended upon the Kata. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a single Mandalorian began to slowly clap his gauntleted hands together. Another joined in, then another, until the entire clan was applauding, a thunderous, rhythmic ovation of Durasteel on Durasteel. Mira lay on the ground, staring up at the man who had defeated her. He hadn't overpowered her, he had outthought her, outmaneuvered her, and defeated her with a level of technical skill she had never witnessed before. There was no killing intent in his eyes, no arrogance. Only a calm, quiet respect. She slapped the packed earth with her hand. The signal of yielding. Naruto immediately removed his knee and offered her a hand up. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Not bad, Mira said, a genuine, grudging smile spreading across her face. Her voice was raspy. For an Aruti, she turned to face her clan. The Aruti has won the wager. He has earned our respect. He and his companions are to be treated as guests of the Keldao clan. A cheer went up from the crowd, a raw, guttural sound of approval. Later, inside the command center of the outpost, the atmosphere was entirely different. They were no longer intruders, but guests of honor. Mira, now out of her armor and in a simple, practical flight suit, oversaw the diagnostics on the parts Naruto had requested. Mandalorian technicians, their helmets off, worked with surprising efficiency on the Starlight Interceptor's engine. The hyperdrive motivator is a lost cause, Mira said, pointing to a holographic schematic. But we have a similar model from a salvaged Corellian freighter. My techs can adapt it, but it will take time. Your ship will fly again. Her gaze lingered on Naruto. A new light in her eyes. It was not the cold appraisal of a commander, but the curious, intense respect of one warrior for another. You fight with a style I have never seen. Where did you learn it? A long way from here. Naruto answered vaguely, sipping a cup of hot, bitter tea she had given him. It was then that a comms officer called out. Alor Keldao, we have an intercept. Long-range scout returning from the Onderan system. Put it on screen, Mira commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the helmeted view from a Mandalorian scout. The image was shaky. Alor, the Sith have arrived. A full blockade fleet, an interdictor-class cruiser is their flagship. They're hailing all ships, demanding our surrender. They know we are here. Mira's face hardened, her good mood vanishing like smoke. They dare. Naruto, Bastila, and Mission watched as the scout's ship was suddenly rocked by an explosion. The feed filled with static, then went dead. The command center was silent. They were trapped again, not by a broken engine, but by a fleet of warships. The Mandalorian technicians stopped their work on the interceptor. There was no point. They couldn't leave. Mira slammed her armored fist down on the console table, the metal groaning under the impact. But when she looked up, there was no despair in her eyes. There was a feral, predatory fire. This was not a problem to her. It was a challenge. It was a hunt. She turned her burning gaze to Naruto. The Sith want a war, she growled, a savage grin spreading across her face. Let's give them one. That command ship has a gravity well projector preventing any jumps out of the system. You helped me test my skills in the circle. Now, I want you to help me test theirs, out there. She jabbed a finger at the star chart, at the red icon of the Sith flagship. I have a plan. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Arcanan Gambit. The briefing room inside the Keldao clan's DXUN outpost was thick with the metally scent of weapon cleaning solvents and the low, predatory hum of a war party gathering its strength. Mandalorian warriors, their armor a clashing tapestry of personal colors and kill markings, performed final checks on their gear. The clicks and snaps of munitions being loaded into rifles creating a percussive rhythm of impending violence. At the center of the room, a large holographic table displayed a three-dimensional rendering of the Onderan system, the angry red icon of the Sith interdictor-class cruiser hanging in space like a drop of blood. Mira Keldao, now fully encased in her crimson battle armor, stood over the table like a goddess of war contemplating her chessboard. Her voice, crisp and amplified by her helmet's calm, cut through the low murmur of the room. Listen up, all of you. The Sith think they have us trapped. They think we are prey. Today, we teach them that a Mandalorian in a cage is not a captive, it is a coiled serpent. She pointed a gauntleted finger at the interdictor. Their command ship, the Vehement, is our primary problem. Its gravity well projectors are preventing any jump to hyperspace. Standard fleet engagement would be suicide. They outgun us 3-1. Therefore, we will not give them a standard engagement. We will give them chaos. Her plan was audacious, bordering on insane, and pure Mandalorian. She outlined a two-pronged assault, her words sharp and precise. Force Alpha, the Hammer, will be led by me. We will take the bulk of our fleet, the Crusader corvette and all 8 of our Jahavar assault fighters, and we will execute a Hig H velocity burn directly at these 2 escort frigates. She highlighted 2 smaller Sith vessels. We will hit them hard and fast, a shock and awe assault designed to draw their full attention. We will be loud, we will be violent, and we will be the perfect diversion. She then looked directly at Bastila, Naruto, and Mission. Force Beta, the scalpel, will be you 3. You will take the Deward. She nodded towards a schematic of a small, angular stealth ship, and use the chaos of our attack to approach the Vehement undetected. Your mission is to board that ship, get to the gravity well control room deep in its engineering section, and sabotage it. Once those projectors are down, we all get out of here. Bastila stepped forward, her expression a mixture of professional concern and grudge. In admiration for the plan's sheer boldness. Your fleet will be facing overwhelming firepower, Captain Keldau. The odds of suffering catastrophic losses are high. The odds of dying of old age on this mudball are 100% if we do nothing, Jedi, Mira retorted. But your concern is noted. Which is why you will not be on the boarding party. Bastila's eyes widened in surprise. My place is. Your place is on the bridge of the Deward, Mira stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. I have read the reports. I know about your battle meditation. While my warriors are fighting, you will be our conductor. You will weave them together, make them fight with the heart of a fleet 10 times our size. Your mind will be our most powerful weapon. Can you do it? For the first time since they had met, Bastila saw a glimmer of genuine respect in the Mandalorian's eyes. It was the respect of one professional recognizing the unique and deadly skill of another. Bastila gave a slow, deliberate nod. I can. Good. Mira then turned to Mission. Urchin, you're the slicer. I'm giving you access to one of our top-of-the-line military-grade slicing kits. Once Naruto is aboard, you will be his eyes and ears. You will crack their security, open his doors, and blind their sensors. Don't screw it up. Mission's eyes lit up like twin novas as a Mandalorian technician handed her a sleek black datapad humming with latent power. Screw it up, lady. With this rig, I could slice my way into Malik's private diary and post it on the holonet. This is gonna be fun. Finally, Myra's T-visor fixed on Naruto. That leaves you, Aruti. You are the ghost, the one who walks through walls. Your job is the simplest and the most impossible. Get to that control room. We will get you on the ship, the rest is up to you. Naruto simply smiled, a calm, confident expression that seemed utterly alien in the tense war room. Don't worry about me, I'm good at making an entrance. The void of space was a silent, black canvas. Far below, the marbled green sphere of Onderon and the sickly, storm-shrouded orb of DXUN provided a backdrop for the drama about to unfold. The Sith fleet was an arrowhead of dark, menacing shapes, with the massive, dagger-like form of the interdictor, the Vehement, at its heart. Aboard the bridge of the Deward, the tension was a physical presence. The stealth P drifted silently in the shadow of a large asteroid, its systems running cold. All units, this is Alor Keldau, Myra's voice crackled over the comm. The hunt begins. For Mandalore. On the main view screen, they watched as 8 Mandalorian fighters and a corvette blasted out from behind DXUN, their engines flaring like angry comets. They didn't engage at range. They flew straight at the Sith frigates in a suicidal charge. Guns blazing. The space between the fleets erupted into a chaotic light show of green and red turbolaser fire. On the bridge of the stealth ship, Bastila closed her eyes. Her consciousness expanded, leaving the confines of the cockpit. She soared into the heart of the battle, a being of pure thought. She felt the fierce, joyful adrenaline of the Mandalorian pilots, a street. Stark contrast to the grim determination of the Republic soldiers she was used to. The Mandalorians were not fighting out of duty, they were fighting for the sheer, glorious thrill of it. She became the conductor of their savage symphony. She didn't need to instill courage, they had that in abundance. Instead, she gave them clarity. She felt a Sith gunner targeting the lead fighter and whispered AP. Remanitive warning into the pilot's mind, allowing him to juke at the last second. She saw a weakness in a frigate's shield rotation and guided a trio of fighters to concentrate their fire on that exact spot. Their proton torpedoes striking home with devastating accuracy. Under her guidance, the small Mandalorian force fought with the coordinated fury of a single, thinking organism. They were a pack of wolves, and she was the alpha. Directing their every snap and snarl. While the battle raged, the Daward, under the cloak of the chaos Bastila was orchestrating, slipped from the asteroid's shadow and began its silent, deadly approach towards the interdictor. "We're in range," the pilot announced. Loading the Beskar bullet. In a small, pressurized chamber near the airlock, Naruto climbed into a single-person boarding pod. It was a cramped, metallic coffin, its nose forged from solid Mandalorian iron. "You ready for this, Blondie?" Mission's voice came through his earpiece. "I'm patched into the ship's comms. I'll be with you every step of the way. Just have the doors open." "Mission," Naruto replied, as the pod's hatch sealed him in darkness. He felt a tremendous jolt as the pod was fired from a magnetic rail. The acceleration pressed him back into his seat. He was a projectile, a silent spear aimed at the heart of the enemy. The impact was violent. With a deafening shriek of tearing metal, the pod punched clean through the outer hull of the Vehement, embedding itself deep within a deserted service corridor. The inner hatch hissed open, and Naruto stepped out into the sterile, oppressive atmosphere of a Sith warship. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the faint, acrid smell of ozone. The corridor was a tunnel of polished black plating and stark, red emergency lighting. It was silent, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. "Okay, I'm in," Mission's voice crackled. "Their internal sensors are a joke. I'm already creating a ghost loop. As far as they know, that corridor is still empty. You've got a clear path to the primary conduit junction, level 7, sector Gamma." Naruto began to move. He was a phantom. His footsteps made no sound. He hugged the shadows, his body a fluid line of motion. He didn't need Mission to tell him where the patrols were. He could feel their life signs through the decks, faint sparks of discipline, cold minds. He pressed hymns. Elf into a recess as a squad of Sith troopers marched past, their armor gleaming, their movements robotic. He reached a locked blast door. "Mission, I'm at a checkpoint." "Already on it," she replied. "Their encryption is cute. Bypassing. Now." The control panel on the door sparked, and the heavy door slid open with a hiss. He continued his descent into the ship's bowels, a ghost in the vast, metallic machine. He sent out 2 shadow clones, not for combat, but for reconnaissance. They split off, one heading down a parallel corridor, the other scaling a ventilation shaft, their shared consciousness feeding him a perfect 3-dimensional map of the path ahead, confirming Mission's directions and spotting potential ambushes. He finally reached his destination, the gravity well projector control room. It was a large, circular chamber, its walls lined with humming computer terminals. In the center, a massive energy conduit pulsed with a deep, gravitational thrum, feeding the 4 massive projectors on the ship's exterior. The room was guarded by a squad of elite Sith commandos and, to Naruto's surprise, 2 red-robed Sith acolytes, their faces pale with concentration as they used the Force to stabilize the energy flow. Before Naruto could formulate a plan of attack, a voice, cool and analytical, spoke from the far side of the room. "My instruments are detecting a biological energy signature that does not correspond to any known species in the ship's manifest. Its output is remarkable." Naruto turned. Standing by a complex holographic data array was a woman. She was an Arcanan offshoot, her skin pure white, her eyes a startling silver. She was dressed in a pristine white science uniform that was jarringly out of place amidst the black and red of the Sith. She held a datapad, her gaze fixed on it, a faint, curious smile on her lips. She didn't seem alarmed or afraid. She seemed intrigued. Your presence is creating a fascinating quantum fluctuation in the local field, she continued, her voice a precise, emotionless monotone. You are not a standard human. Your cellular energy output is orders of magnitude higher. The guards and acolytes, alerted by her voice, turned, raising their weapons. Who are you? One of the acolytes demanded, his hand moving towards the lightsaber at his belt. Just a tourist, Naruto said, as he exploded into motion. He took out the guards first, a blur of silent, disabling strikes. He moved between them, his hands tapping necks and striking joints, leaving them unconscious before they could even fire a shot. The two acolytes ignited their crimson sabers. But they were no match for a shadow clone that flickered into existence between them, engaging them both in a whirlwind of taijutsu that kept them completely off balance. Naruto vaulted over a console and landed directly in front of the Arcanan scientist. We need to leave. Now. She didn't flinch. She simply looked up from her datapad, her silver eyes scanning him with an unnerving intensity. Fascinating. Your kinetic motion is perfectly efficient. A study in applied biomechanics. I am Dr. Alara Vex. Suddenly, the doors to the control room hissed open, and a figure of immense power and dread stepped through. He was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in the black armor of a Sith Lord. A helmet shaped like a bird of prey's skull obscured his face. This was Darth Corvus, the ship's second in command. Dr. Vex, the Sith Lord's voice was a deep, menacing rasp. Report. What is the meaning of this intrusion? His gaze fell on Naruto, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Corvus ignited his lightsaber, its brilliant red blade humming with malevolent energy. He charged, a juggernaut of hate-fueled power. Naruto pushed Alara behind a console. Stay down. He had no choice but to engage. The fight was fast and brutal. Corvus was powerful, his style all aggressive, overpowering strikes. Naruto, forced to fight in a confined space and protect the doctor, couldn't be as elusive as he wanted. He met Corvus's attacks, redirecting, blocking, and countering. Corvus, enraged by this strange, unarmed man's ability to hold him off, feinted a vertical slash and instead swept his blade low. Naruto leapt back, but not quite fast enough. The tip of the lightsaber caught him across the ribs, searing through his tunic and flesh. A sharp, fiery pain shot through Naruto's side. He gritted his teeth, ignoring it, and saw his opening. As Corvus recovered from his lunge, Naruto spun, his leg sweeping out in a powerful kick that connected with the Sith Lord's helmeted head. The impact sent Corvus staggering back, his helmet cracking. Naruto didn't let up, pressing the advantage and landing a series of precise, energy-infused palm strikes to Corvus's chest, staggering him further before a final, powerful blow sent the Sith Lord crashing into the main energy conduit, where he lay stunned and twitching. Naruto leaned against a console, breathing heavily, pressing a hand to the bleeding, cauterized wound on his side. Incredible, Alara's voice came from behind him. He turned to see her staring at his wound, her eyes wide with not horror, but rapt, scientific fascination. A severe fourth-degree energy burn. The flesh is cauterized, but, look. He glanced down. To his own eyes, the healing was slow, but to an outsider, it was a miracle. The edges of the wound were already beginning to knit together, the burned tissue being pushed out as fresh, healthy cells regenerated at a visible rate. Cellular regeneration at a rate I have only theorized, Alara whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. Your genome, it must be a masterpiece. This strange, brilliant woman was not looking at a person, she was looking at a scientific breakthrough. Her initial curiosity had just turned into an all-consuming obsession. We're out of time, Naruto grunted, pushing himself upright. Mission, I need to overload the projectors. Now, on it, Blondie. Mission's voice chirped in his ear, a frantic edge to it now. I'm routing the primary power feed into a feedback loop. You need to manually disengage the magnetic containment clamps. All three of them. Go. Naruto, ignoring the pain in his side, raced from console to console, Alara following him, her eyes still glued to his healing wound. He slammed his hand on each of the 3 emergency release panels. A klaxon began to blare throughout the ship. Warning. Gravity well projector overload imminent. Let's go, Naruto said, grabbing Alara by the arm. Go where? She asked, as he began pulling her towards the exit. Off this ship, before it tears itself apart, he replied. As they ran through the corridors, red lights flashing, Alara seemed to finally snap out of her scientific trance. Wait, you don't understand. You can't just leave me. The Sith, they weren't just funding my research for their own amusement. I figured, Naruto grunted, as they dodged a squad of panicked stormtroopers. I am an expert in viral phage therapies, she explained breathlessly. Targeted biological agents. The Sith were adapting my work to create a weapon. A plague that can be keyed to specific genetic markers. A virus that could, for instance, wipe out the entire Mon Calamari population of a planet while leaving every human untouched. Naruto stopped dead, turning to face her. The full horror of her words washed over him. A genocide weapon. I tried to sabotage their progress from the inside, she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. But the core data, the research, that contains the only possible way to engineer a counter-agent, is not on this ship. It's in my private, encrypted server at the Arcanan Dominion headquarters. On Arcania, you must take me there. It's the only way to stop them. Naruto stared at her, his mind racing. This complicated everything. Extraction team is at the hull breach, Naruto. Mission's voice yelled in his ear. You have 30 seconds before this whole deck blows. He made his decision. All right, you're coming with us. They reached the hull breach just as the Deward swooped in, its boarding ramp extended. Mira Keldau stood on the ramp, a blaster rifle in hand, laying down cover fire. Naruto, with Alara in tow, leapt across the gap and onto the ramp just as a series of internal explosions rocked the vehement. The gravity well projectors overloaded, tearing a massive hole in the side of the interdictor. The main battle was over. The surviving Sith ships, their command vessel crippled, were already in retreat. Myra's fleet had taken losses, but they had won an impossible victory. The journey to Arcania was tense. The four of them, a sage, a Jedi, a scoundrel, and a warrior, were now joined by a fifth, a scientist of questionable morals. Bastila regarded Alara with deep suspicion. Mira saw her as a Hutaun, a coward, a non-combatant who had worked with the enemy. Mission just thought she was a creep. But Naruto knew they needed her. They dropped out of hyperspace into the Arcanan system. The planet was a sphere of brilliant, sterile white. The cityscape was a breathtaking collection of crystalline spires and gleaming silver structures. A monument to cold logic and technological supremacy. Alara guided them to the central spire, the headquarters of the Arcanan Dominion. Her high-level security clearance CE granted them effortless passage through multiple checkpoints, each manned by guards in pristine white armor who looked more like surgical droids than soldiers. My primary laboratory is just ahead, Alara said, her professional calm having returned. The data is on a closed network. I'll need to access it directly. She led them into a vast, circular chamber, its walls a pure, seamless white. Door slid shut behind them with a soft, definitive thump. Instantly, the room was bathed in a crimson light. Red energy fields snapped into place over the doors. Heavy blast doors, previously invisible, slammed down over every exit. Through the now transparent walls, they could see dozens of Arcanan security forces, their advanced-looking blaster rifles leveled at the group. They were trapped. Alara Vex turned to them. Her face not one of triumph or betrayal, but of cold, academic regret. My apologies, she said, her voice as sterile as the room around them. My superiors were most insistent. A living specimen with your unique regenerative capabilities, your impossible energy output, you are a scientific discovery beyond price. Her silver eyes fixed on Naruto, not with malice, but with the unwavering, obsessive focus of a scientist who has just found the key to unlocking the universe. You are simply too valuable to be allowed to leave. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Sight beyond sight. The world dissolved into a cacophony of white noise and crushing pressure. The instant the energy field snapped into place, a multi-layered assault slammed into Naruto's senses. A high-frequency sonic wave, pitched just beyond the range of normal hearing, vibrated through his bones, designed to disrupt concentration. The gravity plating beneath his feet tripled its pull, making his limbs feel like they were cast from lead. And the containment field itself was the worst part. It was not a passive barrier but an active, parasitic energy that latched onto his own, siphoning his power like a thirsty leech. It was a prison designed not just to hold a body, but to dismantle a soul. Specimen is secure, a cold, synthesized voice announced from unseen speakers. Begin energy suppression protocol Epsilon. Naruto grunted as the drain intensified, forcing him to one knee. This was no simple cage. This was a purpose-built trap, meticulously designed by minds who understood energy on a fundamental level. He could feel their intellect in its design, cold, precise, and utterly without empathy. The women were dealt with more crudely. A squad of pristine white security droids, their movements unnervingly fluid, marched into the room. Mira Keldau roared in defiance, a guttural Mandalorian war cry, and launched herself at the nearest droid, her fists connecting with its chassis with enough force to dent the metal plating. But she was unarmored and overwhelmed. A droid's metallic hand chopped at the back of her neck with surgical precision, and she crumpled. Bastila, seeing the futility of a direct fight, raised her hands in a gesture of surrender, her mind already working, assessing, analyzing. Mission yelped and tried to make a run for it, but was neatly scooped up by a droid and held in an unbreakable grip. They were disarmed and herded out of the chamber like livestock. Naruto watched them go, a flicker of cold anger, an emotion he had not truly felt in centuries, touching his spirit before the suppression field dampened it into a dull ache. Another figure entered the chamber. He was an Arcanan, like Alara, but older, his face a mask of arrogant self-satisfaction. He wore the long, formal coat of a high-ranking scientist, and his silver eyes glittered with triumph. This was Chief Geneticist Lorian, Alara's superior. He paid Naruto no more mind than a scientist would a microbe under a microscope. His focus was on Alara. Excellent work, Dr. Vex, Lorian said, his voice smooth and patronizing. Your gambit paid off splendidly. The specimen is even more remarkable than your initial reports suggested. The agreement was that he would be my project, Lorian, Alara stated, her voice tight, her professional calm beginning to crack. The applications for his regenerative abilities. Lorian chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Your project, my dear Alara, you are a brilliant theorist, but this is a galactic-level discovery. This is not something to be wasted on your pet projects for viral therapies. This specimen will be the foundation of the Arcanan Dominion's next phase of genetic supremacy. Your contribution has been noted and will be rewarded. You are dismissed. The cold finality in his voice was absolute. Alara stared at him, the full weight of his betrayal crashing down on her. She hadn't just been a partner in this, she had been a tool, a pawn to acquire a prize she would never be allowed to study. Her face, usually a mask of cool logic, became a canvas of dawning horror. Lorian gestured to the droids. Take Dr. Vex and the others to a secure detention block. Keep them comfortable. We may have use for them later. He turned his back on her, his attention now fully on Naruto. As for our primary asset, take him to the cradle. It is time for a thorough examination. The detention cell was a study in sterile minimalism. The walls, floor, and ceiling were seamless, glowing white, giving the impression of being inside a cube of pure light. There were no beds, only smooth, shallow indentations in the floor. The air was filtered, odorless, and held at a constant, cool temperature. It was a prison designed to offer no sensory purchase, no texture, no escape for the mind. Mira was the first to stir, groaning as she sat up, rubbing the back of her neck. That criffing droid, her eyes blazed with fury as she took in their surroundings. She slammed a fist against the wall, but the material absorbed the impact with a dull thud, leaving not so much as a scuff mark. Blast it all, trapped like a womp rat in a bottle. Bastila was already in a meditative trance, her face a mask of concentration as she tried to reach out with the force. The walls are shielded, she reported, opening her eyes, a line of frustration creasing her brow. And there's some kind of dampening field in here. It's weak, but it makes it difficult to focus. I can't get a sense of the facility's layout. Mission was frantically pacing the cell, her eyes darting everywhere. No vents, no power conduits, no exposed terminals. They built this place good. Too good. We're locked in a bloody light box. Alara Vex sat apart from them, her knees drawn up to her chest, her face pale. The enormity of her miscalculation had shattered her composure. She had traded one cage for another, and in the process, had handed over a being she was beginning to re. Elise was far more than just a scientific specimen. The other three women looked at her, their expressions a mixture of anger and contempt. "This is your fault, you damned snake," Mira snarled, taking a menacing step towards her. "You led us right into this." Alara stammered, shrinking back. "I thought I could control it. I thought Lorian would honor our agreement." "You thought wrong," Bastila said, her voice cold as ice. She intervened, placing a hand on Myra's arm. "Anger won't help us, Mira. We need a plan." "What plan?" Mira shot back, shaking off Bastila's hand. "The plan is we find our gear and we blast our way through this sterile hellhole until we find Naruto." "A plan that will get us all killed," Bastila countered calmly. "We saw their security. Brute force is what they expect. We must be smarter. We have to find a weakness." "The only weakness I see is her," Mira growled, jabbing a finger at Alara. "Then she is also our only advantage," Bastila said, turning her thoughtful gaze to the terrified scientist. She walked over and knelt in front of Alara, her approach not one of accusation, but of calm assessment. "You know this facility. You know its protocols, its layout. You know Lorian. You know his weaknesses. You made a terrible mistake, Dr. Vex. A mistake that has endangered someone who, for some inexplicable reason, chose to trust you. But you have a choice now. You can sit here and wallow in your regret, or you can help us fix it. This is your only chance for redemption. What will it be?" Alara looked up, her silver eyes shimmering with unshed tears of humiliation and rage. Bastila's words, her offer of a chance instead of condemnation, seemed to strike a chord deep within her. The scientist, the pragmatist, was gone, replaced by a woman who had been betrayed and was now being offered an alliance by her own victims. "Lorian is arrogant," Alara said, her voice barely a whisper, but gaining strength with each word. "He believes his systems are perfect. His greatest weakness is his pride. He underestimates everything and everyone he deems inferior. That includes me, and it includes his other projects." "Other projects?" Mission asked, her curiosity piqued. Alara nodded. "This facility, the Cradle, is the Dominion's primary xenobiological research station. They have dozens of unique specimens in deep storage. Most are dormant, but there is one other that is active. A Miraluka female. They captured her from a derelict Sith vessel. They were trying to study her unique relationship with the Force. They deemed the experiment a failure. They said she was broken." Bastila felt a chill run down her spine. A Miraluka, a species that saw not with eyes, but through the Force itself. "Where is she?" "In the specimen wing," Alara said. "2 levels below us, in the same block where they've taken Naruto." A spark of resolve ignited in her eyes. She finally looked up, meeting Bastila's gaze. "There is a network of service corridors that bypasses the main security checkpoints. Lorian doesn't think I know about them. If you can get me to a security terminal, I can create a diversion. A big one. A containment breach in the lower-level specimen pens. It will draw most of the security forces away from the central core. That will be our window." A plan began to form, a desperate, 3-pronged gambit built on Mandalorian aggression, Jedi subtlety, and a scoundrel's technical genius, all guided by the knowledge of a repentant traitor. For the first time since the trap had been sprung, a flicker of hope ignited in the sterile white cell. Naruto floated in a state of suspended animation. He was immersed in a thick, translucent, nutrient-rich gel inside a cylindrical stasis tube. The chamber was vast and dark, filled with dozens of similar tubes. Most of them holding dormant, monstrous creatures from across the galaxy. This was the Cradle. Thin, silvery filaments were attached to his head, his chest, his arms, feeding data to He massive supercomputer that monitored the chamber. The energy leaching field was still active, a constant, heavy drain that left him feeling weak and disconnected from the ocean of power that was usually his birthright. They were not just imprisoning him, they were dissecting his very essence, cataloging his energy, analyzing his chakra. He knew that fighting the drain with brute force was pointless, it would only exhaust him faster. So he did what he had learned to do centuries ago when faced with overwhelming opposition. He turned inward. He withdrew his consciousness deep into his own mind, to the serene, quiet place that was the source of his sage power. He ignored the tubes, the gel, the energy drain, and began to meditate. He couldn't gather external energy, so he would focus on preserving what he had, calming his inner storm, finding the point of perfect balance within himself. It was in this deep, internal state that he heard the cry. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, a raw, unending psychic scream of agony that echoed through the force. It was the sound of a soul that had stared into the abyss and had the abyss stare back. It was broken, terrified, and utterly alone. He realized it was coming from a nearby tube. He shifted his awareness, pushing past the pain of his own predicament, and focused on the source of the scream. He saw her, not with his eyes, but with his inner sense. A young woman, a Miraluka, floating in a tube just like his. Her eye sockets were covered by a simple, embroidered sash, but he knew she was not blind. Her blindness was of a different sort. He reached out to her, not with a command, but with a simple, gentle touch of his consciousness. A single, quiet note of warmth and calm projected into her storm of pain. Peace. The psychic screaming faltered, replaced by a jolt of pure shock. How? Inside her own prison, Visa's Mars world was pain. Ever since her master, the Lord of Hunger, had shown her the galaxy as it truly was, a chaotic wound of life feeding on itself. A constant cycle of suffering, that was all she could see. The Force, for her, was a canvas of death screams and agony. The Arcanian sterile prison was even worse. It was a silent, white noise that only amplified the echoes of the dead in her mind. And then, she saw it. Amidst the swirling, screaming chaos of the Force, a new light appeared. It wasn't the cold, sterile light of the Jedi, nor the raging fire of the Sith she had served. It was a sun, a warm, golden, perfectly balanced sphere of pure life and harmony. It did not fight the chaos, it simply existed within it. A point of absolute serenity that the chaos could not touch. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed. It was a song in a universe of screams. Instinctively, she reached for it, her own battered consciousness a moth drawn to this impossible flame. Who are you? She projected, her thought voice, trembling. Naruto felt her touch, her desperation, her pain. He didn't offer empty platitudes or pity. He offered her the truth. He opened a part of his own mind, showing her how he perceived the Force. He showed her the symphony. He let her feel the quiet strength of the growing plants on Yavin 4. The fierce joy of the Mandalorian warriors, the stubborn resilience of Mission Vow, the conflicted honor of Bastila Shan. He showed her that passion and serenity, life and death, were not a war, but a dance. For the first time in years, Visa saw something other than pain. She wept, silent tears floating away from her face into the gel. This golden sun, this stranger, had given her a gift beyond price, a moment of peace. In gratitude, she turned her unique sight, her curse, into a tool for him. They are holding you, she projected, her focus now clear. I can see the energy. The field that binds you. It is not constant, it pulses. It has a rhythm, a cadence, like a heartbeat. She focused her sight, analyzing the flow of energy into his tube. She saw what the Arcanian engineers could not, a flaw born of their own arrogance. It is a wave, Visas explained, her thought voice growing stronger, more confident. At the peak of each cycle, the containment matrix is at maximum power. But in the trough, to prevent a cascading overload, there is a fractional moment, a microsecond, of weakness. The resonance frequency is off by a factor of 0.001. If you can focus all of your will, all of your remaining energy, into a single point and release it at that exact instant, you can shatter the harmony of their system. Naruto felt the truth of her words resonate within him. She had given him the key. The cage was not unbreakable. It just needed to be struck at the precise, perfect moment. Thank you, he projected back, a feeling of profound gratitude flowing from him. Hold on, I'm getting us out of here. Okay, this is it, Mission whispered, her fingers flying across the surface of a security terminal she had accessed from a service duct. Alara, you were right. Their internal network security is focused on the front door. These service nodes are practically unguarded. The four women were huddled in a cramped, dark maintenance shaft. Guided by Alara, they bypassed the main detention block and found this access point. I'm creating the diversion now, Alara said, taking the datapad from mission. Her usual scientific detachment was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. I'm triggering the release protocols for the Gundark and Ak-Dog specimens on level 9. That should cause a significant disturbance. She typed a final command. A distant roar, foal, loud by the sound of blaster fire and panicked shouting, echoed up the shaft. That's our cue, Bastila said. Let's move. They moved quickly through the service corridors. Mira, who had liberated a heavy blaster rifle from a weapons locker they'd passed, took point. Bastila followed, her mind stretched out, sensing for guards. At one junction, she held up a hand. A patrol, just around the corner. She closed her eyes, and a wave of confusion and drowsiness washed over the unsuspecting guards, who suddenly decided they needed to investigate a noise in the opposite direction. They reached the central security nexus, a hub of computer systems that controlled the entire specimen wing. Here, Alara said, from here, I can access my lab's private server and, hopefully, shut down the suppression field on Naruto's cell. As Alara began to furiously slice into the network, a squad of elite Arcanan guards, clad in heavy white armor, rounded the corner, led by Chief Geneticist Lorian himself. Clever, Dr. Vex, but predictable, Mira didn't hesitate. She opened fire, her blaster rifle spitting bolts of energy that sent the guards scrambling for cover. The firefight was intense. Meanwhile, deep below, Naruto felt the shift, a tremor in the facility's power grid as Alara's hack took effect. He felt the distant chaos of the diversion. He felt the focused intent of his friends fighting their way towards him. It was time. He closed his eyes, focusing on the rhythm visas had shown him. Thump thump, trough, thump thump, trough. He gathered every last ounce of his depleted chakra, every spark of his will, into a single, infinitesimal point in the center of his being. He waited, his timing perfect. Thump thump. Now, he unleashed it, not an explosion, but a sharp, resonant pulse of pure will. Tuned to the exact frequency visas had given him. The effect was catastrophic. The suppression field, struck at its weakest point by a perfectly opposing harmony, shattered. The stasis tube cracked, then exploded outwards in a shower of thick gel and shattered transparasteel. Alarms shrieked, red lights flashing. Naruto landed on the deck, his body weak but his spirit blazing. He ripped the filaments from his skin and immediately smashed his fist into the control panel of Visas's tube, shattering it and freeing her. She tumbled out, physically weak and disoriented, and he caught her. I've got you, he said. His voice the first real sound she had heard in months. Upstairs, the fight at the security nexus had reached a fever pitch. Alara yelped as a blaster bolt grazed the console next to her. I have the data, but I can't override the lockdown on the cradle. Just then, the blast door at the far end of the corridor exploded inwards, torn from its hinges. Naruto stood there, silhouetted in the flashing red light, with the frail form of Visasmar leaning on him for support. He was back. The sight of him, free and radiating a newly unchained power, galvanized the group and struck terror into the Arcanans. Lorian's smug expression melted into one of disbelief and fear. What followed was a swift, brutal conclusion. Naruto, though weakened, moved with a righteous fury. Mira fought with the glee of a predator uncaged. Bastila became a blur of controlled, defensive movements, her lightsaber a shield for the others. Mission, from the safety of a console, turned the F.A. Sility's own defense droids against the Arcanan guards. And Visas, though she could not fight, contributed in the most profound way. Two behind the pillar on the left. She would project into their minds. The leader is reaching for a thermal detonator. Her sight, once a curse, was now their greatest tactical advantage. Lorian, seeing his perfect facility descending into chaos, tried to make a run for it. He was intercepted by Alara, who leveled a blaster pistol at him, her hand trembling but her eyes hard as diamonds. This is for underestimating me, Lorian. She stunned him without a second thought. They fought their way to the docking bay, where the Starlight Interceptor was being held under heavy guard. But in orbit, The Deward had started its own diversion, launching a feint attack on an Arcanan patrol cruiser, drawing away the orbital defenses. Alara, now firmly on their side, sprinted to the cockpit and began the pre-flight sequence. With Naruto and Mira providing cover fire, they all scrambled aboard. Moments later, the Starlight Interceptor blasted out of the docking bay and soared into the cold, clean expanse of space, leaving the chaos of the cradle behind. They were safe. They were free. And they were six. Later, in the ship's main hold, the new group gathered. The silence was broken by Visa's Mar. She slid from the crate she was sitting on and knelt before Naruto, her head bowed. "You showed me the sun in a world of darkness," she said, her voice soft but filled with an unshakable strength. "You gave me back the galaxy. My life, what remains of it, is yours to command. My sight is yours to guide. I will follow your path." Alara stepped forward, holding up a small, silver data chip. "I have it," she announced to the group, her voice clear and strong. "The complete data on the Sith bioweapon. Every formula, every test result. And," she took a deep breath, "the theoretical framework for creating a counter-agent. Our work is not over. It has just begun." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Whispers from a Dying World. The sterile, recycled air of the Starlight Interceptor felt like a sanctuary after their escape from the clinical nightmare of Arcania. A frag. Ill sense of victory hung in the ship's atmosphere, yet it was a victory tainted by the chilling knowledge of what they now carried. The data chip in Alara's possession was not just a trophy, it was a burden. A ticking clock counting down to a genocide of unimaginable scale. The group had settled into a new, unspoken rhythm. 6 individuals from 6 disparate corners of the galaxy, now a single, say, LF-contained unit bound by shared danger. But one of those links was frayed. Visa's Mar was a ghost haunting their ship. She moved with a silent, drifting grace, her hands always held slightly in front of her as if to ward off unseen blows. She never spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was a faint, melodic whisper, like the last echoes of a forgotten song. In the ship's small galley, she would flinch if someone reached for a utensil too quickly. In the corridors, her head would turn sharply at nothing, her body tensing as she saw echoes of pain that were invisible to everyone else. She was with them, but her soul was still trapped in a cage of unending horror. Naruto found her in the aft observation lounge, a small, domed room with a viewport that looked out onto the infinite, star-dusted tapestry of hyperspace. She was standing perfectly still, her back to the door, the swirling blue-white tunnel of faster-than-light travel reflecting off the simple, dark sash that covered her eyes. "You cannot sleep," Naruto said. It was not a question. She didn't startle. She had seen him approach. "Sleep is loud," she whispered. "The quiet moments are when the echoes are the clearest. When I close my eyes, I see their faces, a billion faces, all at once, at the moment of their extinguishing." Naruto came to stand beside her, his presence a warm, steadying anchor in the turbulent sea of her senses. "The world you lost, Qatar. I am the last Miraluka," she stated, a fact delivered with the empty finality of a funeral dirge. "My master, he who called himself the Lord of Hunger, he did not just destroy my world. He consumed it." He spoke a word of pure emptiness into the Force, and the Force screamed, and then there was silence. "I only survived because the blindness he saw in me mirrored his own emptiness. He took me, shaped me. He taught me to see the galaxy as he did, as a wound. A constant, churning feast of life devouring life to no purpose. He showed me that all existence is suffering." "He was wrong," Naruto said simply. "Was he?" Visas tilted her head, a gesture of genuine, painful curiosity. "Your spirit, it is the only thing I have ever seen that does not scream. It sings. A quiet, steady song of impossible balance. How, in a galaxy of such pain, how do you not hear the screams?" "Oh, I hear them," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the swirling vortex outside. "I hear every one, but I also hear the laughter, the courage, the hope, the love. The symphony is not just composed of sorrow, Visas. Your master forced you to listen to only the lowest, most painful notes and told you it was the entire composition. To be free, you must learn to hear the music again." He paused, then turned to face her. "And to do that, sometimes, you must return to the place where the music first died. The proposition hung in the air. The rest of the group, gathered just outside the lounge, had heard everything. Mira Keldao was the first to speak as Naruto and Visas emerged. "You want to go to a dead world?" she asked, her arms crossed, her expression one of pragmatic disbelief. "For what? To chase ghosts. We have the data on a Sith superweapon. That should be our priority." "The psychological state of our crew is a priority, Captain," Alara countered, her voice now holding a measure of warmth that had been absent before. She looked at Visas with a scientist's understanding of trauma. The psychic residue on a world that suffered a cataclysm of that magnitude would be unprecedented. The danger is extreme, but from a therapeutic standpoint, confronting the locus of the trauma is a valid, if radical, methodology. Bastila was torn. The Jedi archives are clear. Worlds that have become massive wounds in the Force, places like Malachor V or Qatar, they are nexuses of dark energy. To go there willingly is to invite corruption. Is it? Naruto asked, his gaze sweeping over all of them. Or is that just what the Jedi tell themselves because they are afraid of the dark? Visas is a part of this crew now. Her wound is our wound. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and her link was forged in the fires of that world. We cannot heal it for her. But we can stand with her while she finds the strength to heal it herself. We go to Qatar. His decision was final. There were no more arguments. A new course was plotted. They were flying into the heart of a graveyard. The approach to Qatar was a descent into absolute null. The planet appeared in the viewport as a cancerous marble of gray and black, devoid of clouds, water, or light. The ship's energy sensors went haywire, the readings fluctuating wildly as they passed through a palpable field of psychic interference. The moment they breached the upper atmosphere, the change was instantaneous and profound. It was not a sound or a sight, but a pressure. A heavy, suffocating blanket of pure despair settled over the ship. It was the collective psychic death rattle of an entire species, an echo that had never been allowed to fade. Mission groaned and clutched her head, a vicious migraine suddenly exploding behind her eyes. Gods, what is that? It feels like my brain is trying to crawl out of my ears. Mira, ever the warrior, gripped the hilt of her blaster, her knuckles white. She felt a primal, chilling dread, the instinct of a soldier standing on unhallowed ground where millions had perished. It feels wrong, she growled. Dishonorable. Alara shivered, rubbing her arms though the ship's temperature was constant. The biofeedback from the crew is alarming. Elevated heart rates, stress hormone production is spiking. This environment is actively hostile to sentient life. For the Force sensitives, it was infinitely worse. Bastila felt as though she were drowning in an ocean of sorrow. The constant, low-level thrum of the light side she was used to was gone, replaced by a gaping, bleeding wound in the fabric of existence. The air itself felt thin, as if the very concept of hope had been leached from it. It was physically nauseating, and she had to brace herself against a bulkhead to keep from collapsing. Only two people seemed unaffected. Visas stood ramrod straight, her expression eerily calm. This was the environment she had known for years. The suffocating despair was as familiar to her as breathing. And Naruto was their shield. He closed his eyes and took a deep, centering breath. He extended his own energy, not as a weapon, but as a sanctuary. A bubble of his warm, golden, balanced presence expanded outwards from him, encompassing the entire ship. The oppressive, soul-crushing despair did not vanish, but it was pushed back, its crushing weight lessened to a bearable pressure. The raw psychic screaming was muffled, like hearing a storm from inside a sturdy house. Mission's migraine subsided to a dull throb. Myra's sense of dread receded, replaced by her usual grit. Bastila could breathe again, the feeling of drowning replaced by a profound gratitude for the golden anchor who stood among them. "I am setting us down," Alara announced, her hands steady on the controls now. Near the coordinates of what the Galactic Registry listed as the capital city, Isis. The Starlight Interceptor landed in a vast, open square. The ground was not stone or soil, but a fine, uniform layer of gray ash that puffed up around the landing gear. The silence was absolute. There was no wind, no weather, just a dead, still world under a perpetually overcast sky. They disembarked, their boots crunching in the ash, the only sound in a world of ghosts. The landscape was a monochromatic nightmare. In the distance, the petrified remains of a forest stood like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. The buildings around the square were melted, slagged husks of obsidian glass. The result of energy so intense it had fused direcrete and stone into a new, horrific substance. "It's all gone," Mission whispered, her usual bravado completely stripped away. "Everything, everyone." As they began to walk towards the center of the ruined city, the hauntings began. They were not ghosts in the traditional sense, but psychic imprints, moments of life frozen in the ash of time. A shimmering, translucent image of a Miraluka family appeared at a shattered market stall, their silent, unheard laughter a stab to the heart. A group of children chased a ball that wasn't there, their forms as insubstantial as smoke, dissolving as the crew drew near. They saw soldiers, Miraluka guards in ancient armor, their faces locked in expressions of final, desperate defiance. And they saw Jedi, members of the long-lost Miraluka enclave, their spectral forms holding lightsabers that cast no light, their spectral bodies locked in a permanent struggle against a tide of darkness only they could see. It was during this long, solemn walk that Visas finally told them everything. "My master did not come with an army," she explained, her voice a monotone that did little to hide the tremor of memory. "He was the army. He was a wound in the Force, and he sought to make the galaxy share his pain. He arrived in orbit, and he spoke a question. He asked the Force on Qatar why it still lived, why it still fought, why it bothered to exist in a meaningless cycle. And the Force tried to answer him. It rushed to fill the void that he was. And he devoured it." She stopped, pointing a slender finger at a shattered spire in the distance. "That was the Jedi Enclave. I was a student there. When the life force of the planet died, the pain was absolute. I hid. I was the only one. He found me, a flicker of life in an ocean of death. He was intrigued. He took me aboard his ship, the Ravager, and he showed me the galaxy through his eyes. He made me see this." She steered to the ghostly echoes around them, everywhere. "In every living thing. He taught me that the only truth is the silence that follows the final scream." Mission, in a gesture of profound, uncharacteristic empathy, moved to walk beside Visas, her shoulder gently bumping against the Miraluka's arm, a small, solid point of contact in a world of phantoms. Mira spat on the ashen ground. "To kill without battle, without honor, it is the way of cowards and insects. To weaponize a philosophical absolute," Alara murmured, her scientific mind horrified by the sheer scale and nature of the atrocity. "It's a crime against existence itself." Naruto remained silent, simply listening, his presence a steady, unwavering warmth at Visas' side. He knew that this was her story to tell, her pain to exorcise. His role was not to speak, but to be the foundation she could stand on while she did it. They finally reached the ruins of the Jedi Enclave. It was the epicenter. The psychic pressure here was immense. A physical force that made the air thick and hard to breathe. A spectral wind, carrying the whispers of a billion souls, began to swirl around them, kicking up clouds of gray ash. The lingering Ingwell of the Lord of Hunger was a palpable vortex of nothingness at the heart of the ruins, a black hole of pure, nihilistic hunger. "He is still here," Visas whispered, her body trembling. "The echo of him. It's hungry." She turned to the group, her face pale but resolute. "There is an ancient Miraluka ritual. A communion of echoes. It allows a seer to speak to the memories imprinted on a place. To find clarity in the past. It is dangerous. The voices can overwhelm the seer, drive them mad. But it is the only way to truly understand what happened here. And the only way for me to prove to myself that I am no longer his servant." "You can't possibly do it alone," Bastila said, her voice filled with alarm. "The psychic energy here would tear your mind apart." "She will not be alone," Naruto said. Visas looked towards him, a question in her unseen eyes. "The ritual needs a channel, a focal point to interpret the echoes, yes?" Naruto asked. "That will be you, Visas. Your sight is the key." He then looked at Bastila. "It will need a lens, a way to shape and focus the raw energy to prevent it from becoming chaotic. Your Jedi discipline, your experience with battle meditation, will be that lens." He placed a hand on his own chest. "And it will need a power source. Something to fuel the ritual and shield you both from the backlash. That will be my role." It was a plan born of their unique, combined strengths. A Miraluka seer, a Jedi Knight, and a sage of a forgotten world. They formed a triangle in the center of the ruined enclave. Visas knelt, her hands resting on the ashen ground. Bastila sat opposite her in a meditative posture. Naruto stood behind them both, a guardian and a generator. "Begin," he said. Visas opened her mind. Bastila fell into a deep trance, her own consciousness reaching out to shape the flow of the Force. And Naruto opened the floodgates. A torrent of pure, golden sage energy poured from him, enveloping the two women in a protective, radiant aura. He did not impose his will on the dead world, he pushed back the suffocating despair, creating a sanctum of calm in the heart of the storm. The world dissolved. They were no longer on Qatar. They were adrift in a chaotic sea of memory and time. They saw the Miraluka world in its prime, a vibrant planet of artists and seers. Then they were ripped away, pulled into the presence of the Lord of Hunger. They felt his chilling, absolute emptiness, the insatiable craving of a wound that could never be filled. Then, the vision shifted, pulled by an invisible thread to a different, yet similar, hunger. A new image coalesced from the chaos. Malik. He stood on the bridge of a colossal space station, a terrifying, semi-organic structure that seemed to writhe with a life of its own, surrounded by a corona of crimson lightning. It was a factory and a beast, pulling raw materials from a nearby nebula and churning out a ceaseless production line of Sith fighters and war droids. The Star Forge. They saw ships docking, unloading raw materials harvested from conquered worlds. And they saw one ship delivering a different kind of cargo. Canisters marked with the Arcanan Dominion's logo. They saw the bioweapon being prepared. And in a flash of terrible understanding, they saw its purpose. It was not a weapon of conquest. It was a tool of purification. A way to efficiently wipe a planet of all complex life, leaving behind only raw, organic matter and minerals for the Star Forge to easily scoop up and consume. The bioweapon was not the goal, it was the appetizer for the main course. As the vision reached its crescendo, a final piece of information burned itself into their minds. A map, not a modern star chart, but an ancient, alien design, its lines and symbols belonging to a civilization dead for 20 millennia. The Rakata, the builders of the Star Forge. And with the map came a whisper, a single word echoing on the psychic wind, the location of the next piece of the puzzle. Korriban. The vision shattered. They were back in the enclave, gasping, the three of them collapsing to the ashen ground, drained and shaken. The spectral wind had died down. The oppressive weight of the world had lessened. As if by confronting the memory, they had robbed it of some of its power. Visas was weeping, but for the first time since Naruto had met her, they were tears of catharsis, of release. She had stared into the abyss of her past, but this time, she had not been alone. And she had not fallen in. They slowly got to their feet, a new, unbreakable bond forged between them in the psychic crucible. They were no longer just a collection of individuals. They were a single unit, their strengths and weaknesses now intimately known to one another. Visas turned her face towards the gray, dead sky, and though her sash still covered her eyes, they all felt that she was truly seeing it for the first time. Not as a tomb, but as a place that could finally begin to heal. They knew their enemy. They knew the stakes, and now, they had their destination. A silent promise passed between the six of them. They would see this through, not just for the galaxy, but for the billion silent voices they had just communed with. Together. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Crucible of Korriban. The jump from hyperspace was not a transition but a violation. They emerged from the serene, blue-white tunnel of unreality into a space dominated by a world that bled. Korriban. It hung in the void like a festering wound, a sphere of oxidized red rock and angry, churning brown clouds, laced with perpetual lightning storms that illuminated its scarred surface. Even from orbit, the planet radiated a palpable malevolence. On the bridge of the Starlight Interceptor, a heavy silence fell. The warm, life AF, firming energy of Yavin 4 had been a song. The desolate, silent grief of Qatar had been a scream's echo. This was different. This was a predator's growl. The force here was not wounded or absent, it was actively, intelligently hostile. It was a tangible presence that slithered into the ship, whispering promises of power into the dark, quiet corners of the mind. By the force, Bastila breathed, her hand instinctively going to the Jedi medallion she wore beneath her robes. The air felt thick, poisonous, making each breath a conscious effort. It is everything the archives claimed, and worse. It feels. Mira Keldau shifted. The plates of her newly repaired armor rasping together. It feels like a planet that has won a war against itself and hates itself for the victory. The dark side energy is off the charts. Alara reported from her science station, her voice a tight, clinical monotone that did little to hide her unease. It's not just a nexus. The entire planet seems to be a self-sustaining generator of negative energy. Fascinating. And terrifying. Visa stood perfectly still, her head tilted as if listening to a distant, familiar music. This place is not dead, she whispered. Her voice filled with a strange reverence. It is sleeping, and it dreams of conquest. Naruto stood behind them all, his arms crossed, his blue eyes fixed on the angry red orb. He could feel it pressing in on him, a tide of raw, untamed passion, ambition, and rage. It was a tempting feast for any Force user. For a Jedi, it was a poison to be resisted. For a Sith, it was a banquet to be devoured. For him, it was simply loud. An orchestra where every musician was playing a crescendo at the same time. The vision on Qatar was clear, Bastila said, turning to face them, her expression grim. The next piece of the Rakatan map is here, hidden within the tomb of the ancient Sith Lord, Naga Sato. The Valley of the Dark Lords, Mira added, pulling up a schematic of the planet's surface. According to our historical data, it's the most heavily guarded place on the planet, right next to the Sith Academy itself. We can't just walk in. No, Naruto agreed, his gaze unwavering. We can't, so we won't walk in as enemies. He turned to the group, a plan already fully formed in his mind. We will walk in as supplicants, as hopefuls, as acolytes seeking to join their ranks. The statement was met with stunned silence. You cannot be serious, Bastila said, her voice aghast. To pose as followers of the Sith. To walk into their most sacred place. It is madness. They will see through us in an instant. They will see what they want to see, Naruto countered. They will see ambition. They will see a desire for power. All of you, he looked around the group, have that in abundance. We will simply show them the parts of ourselves they expect. We will hide in plain sight. It was a terrifyingly simple, yet complex, plan. They landed the interceptor in a secluded, windswept canyon miles from the academy. The ship's hull plates seeming to absorb the red dust of the planet. There, they shed their identities. Mira reluctantly locked her Mandalorian armor away. Bastila hid her Jedi robes. They all donned the simple, dark, utilitarian tunics that Naruto had procured on Nar Shaddaa. Looking at each other, they were no longer a Jedi, a Mandalorian, a scoundrel, a scientist, and a seer. They were a grim, anonymous group of aspirants, ready to knock on the devil's door. The Sith Academy was a monument to brutalist architecture and intimidation. Carved from the black rock of a canyon wall, it loomed over the landscape. Its sharp, angular lines a stark defiance of the natural world. As they approached the great gates, they passed under the watchful gaze of colossal statues depicting long-dead Sith lords. Their stone faces carved into permanent sneers of contempt. The air itself hummed with a palpable energy, a mixture of fear, ambition, and simmering violence. They saw other groups of hopefuls making their way to the entrance, aliens and humans of all stripes, each eyeing the others with a mixture of suspicion and predatory calculation. This was not a school, it was a shark tank. And they had just volunteered to be the bait. A tall, gaunt Sith master with a severe face and eyes like chips of obsidian met them at the entrance. He looked them over, his gaze lingering on each of them for a moment, probing. Testing. More fodder for the mill, he said, his voice a dry rasp. You come seeking power. You believe you have the passion, the will, to claim it. Most of you are wrong. You will be broken. You will be food for the worthy. But the Sith are not without their generosity. You will be given the chance to prove your strength. Enter. The overseer will address you. They were led into a grand chamber. Its ceilings so high they were lost in shadow. Hundreds of acolytes stood in tense, silent formations. The atmosphere was thick with the stench of rivalry. In one corner, 2 acolytes were engaged in a sparring match that was nothing short of a brutal beatdown, ending only when one lay unconscious in a pool of his own blood. No one intervened. It was simply the way of things. On a raised dais at the front of the hall stood the academy overseer, Uthar Wynn. He was an older man, his face a web of fine lines, but his eyes burned with a youthful, fanatic fire. He watched the new arrivals file in, his expression one of bored contempt. "You have come to this hallowed ground seeking to become Sith," Uthar's voice boomed, magically amplified. "You believe you are special. You are not. You are nothing. Worms, crawling in the dust of forgotten worlds." He began to pace the dais. "But you can be something more. The Jedi will tell you to fear your passions. They will tell you to seek peace. To suppress your anger, your ambition, your hate. They lie. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, you gain strength. Through strength, you gain power. Through power, you gain victory. And through victory, your chains are broken. This is the code of the Sith. This is the truth of the galaxy." His voice rose to a fervent crescendo. "Here, you will be tested. You will be pushed to your limits and beyond. Your rival is your whetstone, sharpening you for the battles to come. Your hatred is your strength. Your ambition is your guide. Those who are weak will perish. Those who are strong will rise. Welcome to the crucible." As the speech ended, a subtle but powerful wave of dark side energy washed over the assembled acolytes. It was not an attack. It was a catalyst, an insidious whisper designed to find the cracks in every soul and pour into them, amplifying their deepest desires, their most profound fears. And for the crew of the Starlight Interceptor, the true test began. Bastila found herself drawn to a quiet library off the main hall. It was a dark, silent place, filled with ancient texts and humming holocrons. Her Jedi reverence for knowledge called to her. She reached out and touched a simple, unadorned holocron. The moment her fingers made contact, the world vanished. She was no longer on Korriban. She was on the bridge of her old ship, the Endar Spire. Watching Coruscant burn, the Jedi Temple was a smoking ruin. The Senate Tower had collapsed. Sith ships filled the sky, and she could hear the screams of the dying. She saw her friends, her masters, being cut down. A wave of utter despair washed over her. Then, a voice, deep and seductive, whispered in her mind. "You could have stopped this. You have the power. Battle M. Editation. It is a crude tool in your hands. But it could be so much more. You could become the force of order itself. Not just guiding one fleet, but all of them. You could touch the mind of every soldier, every citizen, instilling in them a perfect, unwavering peace. No more war. No more conflict. An entire galaxy, harmonized by your will. All you must do is accept the power. Embrace it." She saw it, a vision of herself, floating above a peaceful galaxy, her will the ultimate law, her mind the ultimate authority. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything she had ever wanted. She reached for it, the temptation an irresistible song. "Forced peace is not peace, Bastila." Naruto's voice cut through the vision. She turned to see him standing beside her in the illusion, his expression one of profound sadness. "It is tyranny with a gentle name. Harmony cannot be commanded from a throne. It must be chosen, freely, by every heart. That is the only harmony that has meaning." His words were a splash of cold, clear water on her face. The seductive vision shattered, and she was back in the dusty library on Korriban, her hand trembling as she pulled it back from the holocron. She looked at Naruto, her eyes filled with shame and gratitude. He simply nodded, a silent anchor in the corrupting storm. Mira, meanwhile, had found an old, disused armory. It was a treasure trove. On racks and plinths sat the armor and weapons of the very first Mandalorian Crusaders, those who had fought alongside the legendary Sith Lord Exar Kun. It was the armor of her ancestors, humming with the echoes of their glory. As she reached out to touch a helmet, the spirits of the long-dead warriors stirred. "You are of the blood," they whispered, their voices like the rustle of sand. "Our strength can be yours. The clans are scattered, weak. They have forgotten the old ways. Take up our banner. Wield our blades. With this power, you can unite them. You can forge a new Mandalorian empire, greater than any that has come before. You will be Mandalore the Unifier. You will be a legend." The allure was intoxicating. To restore the glory of her people, to become their ultimate leader, it was her life's dream. She saw herself leading a new crusade, a tide of Mandalorian iron washing over the galaxy. Their strength was in their will, Mira, not just their armor. Naruto's voice was quiet, but it resonated with a warrior's truth. He stood at the entrance to the armory. You seek to lead the Mandalorians. Then lead them. Don't let the ghosts of the past lead you. Forge your own legend. Don't just wear theirs. Mira looked from the ancient, powerful armor to her own scarred, crimson plates. Naruto was right. Her honor had to be her own. She turned her back on the whispering spirits and walked out of the armory, her resolve hardened. Mission's test was cruder. As she explored the training grounds, she was cornered by a trio of hulking, brutish acolytes. The leader, a red-skinned Zabrok, sneered at her. Look what we have here. A Twi'lek street rat, come to play with the big boys. You're pathetic, weak. They closed in on her, their faces masks of cruel amusement. Fear, cold and familiar, gripped Mission. But with it came a surge of white-hot rage. And with the rage came a whisper from the dark world around her. Show them what you are. You have power now, you feel it. Crush them, make them fear you, make them grovel, never be weak again. She felt a surge of raw, untamed energy welling up inside her, the force responding to her fury. She could do it, she could hurt them, badly. A warm hand settled on her shoulder. Naruto. The warmth cut through the icy rage, grounding her. Power gained through fear is a cage. Mission, he said softly, his voice for her ears alone. They want you to become like them. A bully, a thug. Show them you are better. True strength is having the power to destroy your enemies and choosing to walk away. Mission looked at the leering faces of the acolytes, then at Naruto's calm, trusting eyes. She took a deep breath, letting the rage drain out of her. She turned to the Zabrok, lifted her chin, and gave him a smirk. You're right, I am a street rat. And this rat is bored of you. She turned and walked away, leaving the acolytes confused and strangely impotent. Alara's temptation was one of pure intellect. She discovered a sealed wing of the academy, a Sith alchemy laboratory. Peering through a reinforced window, she saw things that made her scientific mind reel. Scrolls detailing forbidden genetic manipulation techniques. Devices are splicing the essence of the Force into living tissue. The secrets to creating life, to perfecting it, to breaking the very laws of nature she had dedicated her life to studying. It was the ultimate repository of knowledge. Ethics be damned. You seek to understand life by taking it apart. Alara, Naruto's voice came from beside her. He too was staring into the lab. But can you understand a song by analyzing each note separately? Or a painting by cataloging each molecule of pigment? Some knowledge isn't meant to be possessed. It is meant to be respected from a distance. To dissect a miracle is to destroy it. Alara looked at the forbidden secrets, the answers to all her questions, and then at Naruto. He was right. He himself was a living miracle. To understand him, she didn't need to dissect him, she needed to learn from him. She turned away from the window, a new, more profound curiosity taking root in her heart. For Visas, the trial was the most insidious of all. The dark side GY of Korriban did not feel like a threat. It felt like home. It felt like the familiar, comforting presence of her old master. It whispered to her that Naruto's path of balance was a lie, a weakness. True sight comes from pain, it hissed. True power comes from embracing the abyss. You were strong then. You are weak now. Come back. Come home. She felt the old conditioning washing over her, the urge to surrender to the familiar darkness. She stumbled into a dark, empty chamber, her body trembling as she fought a war within her own soul. Naruto found her there. He didn't speak. He knew philosophy would not work here. Instead, he simply reached out with his mind and projected a memory. It was not a grand vision or a profound lesson. It was a simple, perfect sensation, the feeling of the warm sun on his face in his garden on Yavin 4. The smell of damp earth. The sound of trickling water. The simple, pure beauty of it was a dagger of light in her world of darkness. It was real. The pain was real, but this was real too. You choose which reality you want to live in, he projected softly. Visas took a shuddering breath, the golden warmth of his memory chasing away the cold whispers of her past. She had made her choice. Having weathered their personal storms and proven their worthiness, Through their sheer resilience, Overseer Uthar granted them access to the Valley of the Dark Lords. For their final acolyte trial, to venture into one of the ancient tombs and retrieve an artifact of significance. The valley was a place of awe-inspiring dread. A great canyon lined with colossal Tuesday and the gaping maws of tombs belonging to Sith lords whose very names were curses. The air was cold, heavy, and saturated with the dark side. They stood before the tomb of Naga Sato, a monstrous edifice of black stone. The entrance was sealed by a shimmering energy field. "This is as far as you go," Naruto told them. "This trial is for me alone." He stepped forward into an antechamber, and the way sealed behind him. The trial of the tomb began. It was a psychic assault. A vision of himself as a god emperor, ruling the galaxy with absolute power, his friends and lovers his loyal lieutenants. Then, a vision of the destruction of his own home village, Konoha, forcing him to relive his greatest failure, his deepest pain. It was a test of the two great temptations, ultimate power and ultimate despair. Naruto faced them both. He looked upon the vision of his empire and acknowledged the ambition within him, but tempered it with the knowledge of responsibility. He looked upon the vision of his failure and acknowledged his grief, but refused to be consumed by it. He walked the razor's edge between them, neither accepting nor rejecting, simply observing and understanding. He was not a being of light rejecting the dark, or a being of dark surrendering to it. He was balanced. The ancient tomb, built to corrupt any Jedi and empower any Sith, did not know what to make of him. Recognizing a being of immense power who defied its binary logic, it simply yielded. The energy field dissipated. Inside the main burial chamber, resting on a black stone dais, was a small, pyramidal object made of a strange, iridescent metal. The Rakatan map piece. He took it. As he stepped out of the tomb, the sky above the valley seemed to boil. A siren shrieked from the academy. "Intruder! The tomb has been desecrated. Seal the valley." Uthar Wind's voice roared from projectors. "So much for the subtle approach," Mira grunted, drawing her blaster. Their cover was blown. The entire Sith Academy begged, and to pour into the valley, dozens of acolytes, Sith masters, and hulking, cybernetically enhanced war beasts known as Tukata. They were cornered. A direct fight was impossible. "The plan has changed," Naruto yelled over the din. "We're not fighting. We're running." Mira, explosives. Bastila, the rocks. Mission, the turrets. Alara, find a weak point. Visas, BRIs. Chaos erupted. Mira tossed a series of powerful Mandalorian thermal detonators, collapsing the canyon pass behind them and cutting off one route of pursuit. Bastila reached out with the force, not to attack the Sith, but to destabilize the cliff face above, sending a river of rock and dust down to block another path. Mission, using the datapad she had never relinquished, sliced into the Academy's automated defense grid, ning its own turbolaser turrets against the charging Sith. Alara, her eyes scanning the ancient architecture, pointed to a crumbling archway. There, a structural weakness. A powerful enough blast LD bring it down and block the main entrance. Naruto. Visas projected into his mind. Uthar is leading a charge on your left flank. They are faster than the others. I see them. Naruto yelled back. He pressed his palms together, and the valley floor erupted in a sea of orange and black. Dozens, then hundreds, of shadow clones appeared, a chaotic, undisciplined army that charged the Sith ranks with a deafening roar. They swarmed the Tukata beasts, overwhelmed the acolytes, and created a massive, confusing brawl that allowed the real group to break through the cordon. They sprinted out of the valley, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. They ran through the scorched red desert, back to the hidden canyon where the Starlight Interceptor waited. They scrambled up the ramp just as the first Sith fighters screamed overhead. The ship blasted off, pursued by a squadron of screeching interceptors. Alara pushed the engines to their limit, the ship shuddering as it clawed its way into orbit. They made the jump to hyperspace, the angry red world of Korriban and its pursuing fighters vanishing in an instant. They had the map piece. They had faced the heart of the Sith Empire and survived. But they were no longer a secret. The galaxy now knew of the sage and his strange, powerful band of followers. The hunt would begin in earnest. Chapter 8 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.